Welcome to the IDP Plus Advice Show. Today we're going to look at Week 7 snap counts, defensive player alignment and positioning. We're going to talk about IDP injuries, resulting waiver impacts. We're going to talk about all those things today. And I am your host, Ricky Rodriguez. You can find me on X at RickyRod66. Unfortunately, my partner in crime, Mr. Shawn Teague, who you can find on X as Shawn8386. With school starting and Shawn being younger than me, he has kids with school sports things going on tonight and he's unable to join. So he sends his apologies, but he will be here for the Start Sit show on Sunday. I am happy to be here with you on Tuesday, October 21st to do this recap. And of course, we'll be releasing this recording on early Wednesday morning. All right, as always, you can leave your comments, questions, suggestions on the YouTube channel. Shawn and I will be checking those and responding to those periodically. And we'd appreciate if you give us a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. All right, with that, let's go ahead and get started with Week 7, looking back. And we're going to start with the AFC East, and we're going to start with the Buffalo Bills, as we always do, except for the fact they were on bye last week. So just a couple of things I want to mention on them. We'll have to keep an eye this week on Terrell Bernard and Matt Milano, them coming back from injuries. And at the safety position, Jordan Poyer was called up from the practice squad in their last game before the bye. When Cole Bishop was out for a little bit of period of time, Poyer stepped in for him. There's been real concerns about the secondary, the defense in general for Buffalo. Do they start relying on Poyer over the younger Bishop or Taylor Rapp, who has really struggled as well? Something to watch and be careful, even in this week coming up, Week 8, where there's going to be 6 teams on bye. Be careful about Taylor Rapp and Cole Bishop, and let's pay attention to if any news comes out on that. Of course, come to the Start Sit show on Sunday morning. We will make sure and give you the latest and greatest information that we have. All right, let's go to the Miami Dolphins, who played 57 snaps against the Cleveland Browns. The good news, Tyrel Dodson returned from concussion. He and Jordan Brooks basically played 100% of those 57 snaps. Brooks led the team with 9 tackles. Dodson had 8 and got a sack in there, which is fantastic. So everything normal at linebacker position. At the edge position, that's where we saw some changes. Jalen Phillips played 81% of the snaps, which was a season high for him. Now, he only had 2 tackles, but he did get a sack as part of that, which was great. But Bradley Chubb, who had been playing roughly the same amount of snaps as Phillips, he was in that 68% range. Chop Robinson, who had dropped into like the low 30% range, was back up to 44% this week. So it seems like there's a clear pecking order here, with Jalen Phillips first, Chubb second, Chop third. Chop not playing enough still to play him in our IDP lineups. Chubb, with his 68%, was still productive with 5 tackles, and plus he got a tackle for loss and a quarterback hit, which is great. But it says, once again, Phillips, Chubb, Robinson. Phillips is also someone that is being mentioned in trade rumors. And if he ends up on the right team, let's say he ends up with the Lions across from Aiden Hutchinson. I don't have any inside information, but boy, as he continues to improve week over week and the Dolphins have shown that trust in him, this isn't just about showcasing him because they'd probably be worried about him getting injured if they overplayed him. I think the Dolphins coaches think Phillips is really taking a step forward. So with that, he's someone to watch and maybe someone to stash, particularly in deeper leagues, Jalen Phillips. Moving to the secondary, Ashton Davis played 100% of the snaps at safety next to Minkah Fitzpatrick. Ashton Davis is now apparently the clear starter at safety along with Minkah Fitzpatrick. In those 100% of the snaps, he finished 3rd on the team in tackles with 7. He also played 56% of the snaps close to the line of scrimmage. For those that are new to this show, or as a reminder for others, when I say close to the line of scrimmage, that means either played on the defensive line at the start of snap, at an off-ball linebacker position, which we also call in the box, or in the slot. So that's where, when I say close to the line of scrimmage, and that's what Ashton Davis, 56% of the snaps is what he did. Okay? Now, because of the bad weather, It could have impacted why he played so much in the box. That and the pop gun arm of Dillon Gabriel, where they weren't exactly worried about him beating them deep constantly, were the Dolphins. So Minka even played 69% of the snaps close to the line of scrimmage. So that just tells you the feelings about Dillon Gabriel and his arm and his ability to go deep. But also the bad weather also made it even harder for Gabriel to potentially throw deep. Minka, I sure would like to have seen more than 4 tackles out of him in that 69% of snaps close to the line of scrimmage. Once again, it was only 57 snaps, not the average around 65 per game that a defense usually plays this year. But we're not giving up faith on Minka Fitzpatrick, as talented as he is, and with that kind of usage. All right, let's move on to the New England Patriots here. And I am going to start writing down the timestamps so that people are aware, because I know people want that. Hard to do a show and record timestamps at the same time. I digress. The New England Patriots only played 53 snaps against the Tennessee Titans. Okay, this was a blowout game to boot. So with that blowout, you're not, and not playing many snaps, you're not going to get typically good stats. We've talked about that in previous shows. However, when Robert Spillane plays 100% of the snaps, even at 53, we sure expect more than 2 tackles, only one of which was solo. We expect much, much better than that from Robert Spillane. Spillane's strength is when he's able to play zone coverage out of his linebacker position. In this Patriots defense, he ends up playing more man-to-man, chasing a running back out of the backfield, maybe chasing a tight end off the edge, come off the edge, etc. That is not his strength. That's part of the reason the Steelers never played him 100% of snaps, and when his rookie contract ran out, they let him go. So he's going to have these ups and downs, and particularly in a game where it became a blowout and Tennessee had to throw the ball a lot, weren't running the ball very much, not creating those opportunities for him. Marte Mapu has been the Patriots' sort of pass coverage linebacker the past few games, and he actually led the team with 8 tackles in those, and he played only 38% of the snaps. So we're not going to chase Marte Mapu, folks. So listen to these snap counts for the number 2 linebacker. And remember, Spillane played 100%. Mapu, 38%. Christian Ellis, 30%. Jelani Tavai, 23%. Jack Gibbons, 21%. We're not chasing any of those guys. We're not playing any of these in our lineups. We're not even stashing any of these guys unless you're in the deepest of deepest leagues. But even that, boy, you're going to have a lot of heartburn if you have to play these guys with those kind of snap counts and snap percentages. Moving to the defensive line, one of the things Shawn and I have talked about, it somewhat jokingly but very serious, is that if you have some pretty good edge rushers and they're playing against the Tennessee Titans, you start them. And the same is true for pretty good interior defensive linemen as well. Well, that once again turned out to be true, as K'Lavon Chaisson from LSU, by the way. He only played 57% of the snaps, so a total of 30 snaps, but he got you 3 tackles and he got you 2 sacks. He got credited with a forced fumble, a fumble recovery, even though Cam Ward kind of dropped it when Chaisson was coming at him, but he gets credit for the forced fumble, the fumble recovery, and of course the touchdown that he scooped and scored. Harold Landry also had 3 tackles and got a sack as well. The golden rule right now, if you're playing against the Tennessee Titans, you are playing those edge players. And I don't know what it is about these big offensive linemen for Alabama that are big and kind of heavy, and Evan Neal and J.C. Latham, etc. But these big, heavy set of linemen for Alabama, maybe they're great in college, but they are not translating right now to the NFL. And that's not just a cheap shot at Alabama, just an observation. Moving to defensive tackle, Milton Williams had another solid game with 5 tackles, including a sack. Milton Williams continues to justify the money the Patriots are playing him for from a football perspective, and we can use him in our lineups as a low-end 1, high-end 2 sort of defensive tackle in our fantasy football teams. At the safety position, yes, Craig Woodson and Kyle Duggar played 100% of the snaps. Jalen Hawkins was out with injury with that hamstring issue, so he sat out. Duggar played for him. Woodson had 1 assisted tackle, Duggar had 1 solo and 1 assisted tackle. Not exactly what we're hoping for. But everything was kept in front of them. Both of them played 74% of the snaps deep. So, in other words, they're saying, Cam Ward, you can't dink and dunk it up the field on us. We don't think you can do it and score. We're just going to keep on keeping everything in front of us. And everybody in front of them did what they needed to do. Maybe it was spread across a bunch of people as we talk about the linebacker position, but they shut it down basically, not leaving much for Woodson and Duggar. And once again, both of them played 74% of the snaps deep. If Hawkins is out again, and I unfortunately didn't get a chance to look ahead to who the Patriots play, but assuming it's a normal offense or a fairly decent offense, I would expect Duggar to play more snaps closer to the line of scrimmage if Hawkins is out, as I was saying. But Duggar hasn't put up really any big stats at this point in time. So be careful about using Duggar even if Hawkins is out again. And my apologies to Marcus Jones as a side note, because I believe it was the Start Sit show where I said, surely Marcus Jones will not get another interception that bolsters his stats up. And he proved me wrong. So I admit when I'm wrong. Interceptions are fluky, folks. Don't get hung up on points from interceptions. We're looking for that tackle base first and then big plays on top of that. So great for Marcus Jones that he's gotten the interceptions in 2 last 3 weeks, plus a sack last week. But don't get too hung up on that. All right, let's move to the New York Jets here, folks. And the New York Jets played 71 snaps against the Panthers. Jamian Sherwood, great game with 10 tackles, and he gave us a big play. He got a sack, throwing a pass defense as well. Certainly earning his keep with the Jets. Kiko Mawagoa continues to be the number 2 linebacker. Played 94% of the snaps, which is fantastic. But for a late round draft pick, what you're going to find is that you're not going to find great stats. So he came through with 5 tackles, 2 solo, no big plays. That's kind of what you could expect. 6 teams on bye, as we talked about earlier. Do you play Malagoa? Yeah, in deeper leagues, you might have to, kind of thing. But boy, he's not someone we're chasing. So be careful about that. Still haven't heard any word yet about Quincy Williams when he might return, or Marcelino McCrary Ball when he might return, both on injured reserve currently. We'll have to keep an eye out for that. I'm no longer worried about Mykal Walker taking over from Malagoa. Mykal Walker for the second week in a row plays in the 21% range, 20% range, somewhere around there. So at this point, it looks like it's Malagoa. And you know how I feel based on what I just said. At the edge position, Jermaine Johnson and Will McDonald led the teams in snaps. At that position, both came out with 3 tackles. Not much to talk about this past week. Quinnen Williams finished second on the team as moved to defensive tackle with 8 tackles for Quinnen Williams. Played 72% of the snaps. The thing I'm worried about Quinnen Williams, this is fantastic in a season high, but as the Jets season goes on, and if they continue to lose and the offense struggles and it gets really frustrating, will he continue to play with that energy and passion that he's still playing with right now? They're paying him to do so, but we're all humans, and will he continue to do that? I'm not quite sure. So, caution about Quinnen Williams as we look ahead. Moving to the safety position, Malachi Moore played 100% of the snaps next to Andre Sisco. Tony Adams played 0% of the snaps on defense. He was active. He did play some special team snaps. Tony Adams has been usurped, has been benched, whatever word you want to use, and replaced by Malachi Moore. Now, a lot of people are trying to compare Malachi Moore to Brian Branch because they both played with Alabama. They had similar backgrounds and experiences. Moore is not Brian Branch, folks. He is a talented player, but he's not Brian Branch talented. He did have 4 tackles, got a pass defense. One of those tackles, tackle for loss, was great. So nothing phenomenal, and that was on 71 snaps. Deeper leagues, dynasty, maybe it's time to start stashing Malachi Moore. And by the way, he played 58% of the snaps close to the line of scrimmage, which is fantastic. But it's going to take some time before he gives the kind of IDP stats we're looking for. So be excited for the playing time, Don't be too excited to get him into your lineups yet. Andre Cisco, by the way, played 66% deep as a side note. At cornerback, Sauce Gardner left the game with a concussion. Azaria Thomas, the rookie from Florida State, stepped in for him. Jarvis Brownlee was the slot cornerback for the Jets, so keep that in mind. Okay, so that is the New York Jets, folks, and we're going to move to Baltimore very quickly. Now, Baltimore was on bye, so not much to talk about there other than the fact that on Monday, Roquan Smith returned to practice, which is great news. I expect it to be back to how it was before Roquan was injured, which Roquan 1, Teddy Buchanan 2. Yes, Trent Simpson did well, but I don't expect him to have jumped over Teddy Buchanan because Teddy Buchanan didn't play bad either. So if you got to use Trent Simpson for that 1 week, fantastic, or 2 weeks, but time to put him back on the bench, folks. All right, that is Baltimore, given that they were on bye. Let's move over to the Cincinnati Bengals. And Cincinnati played 57 snaps against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Starting at linebacker, the big news is I think it's pretty much cemented now. Logan Wilson is out of the starting lineup. It's over with for him in Cincinnati in terms of from a starting perspective. He only played 46% of the snaps. Barrett Carter wore the green dot 100% of the snaps. Demetrius Knight, 84% of the snaps. Barrett Carter led the team in tackles with 12, which was fantastic. Demetrius Knight was a little bit disappointing with only 4 tackles and a quarterback hit. But looks like Carter and Knight, as part of this youth movement, are the two going forward. They're going to have to eat some money on Logan Wilson's contract when they either let him go at the end of the year or if they trade him and some of that salary cap will accelerate into this year. But Logan Wilson is done. If you're a Logan Wilson owner, all I can tell you is maybe you hold him for a couple more weeks with the hope that he gets traded. The trade deadline for the NFL is Tuesday, November 4th at, I believe it's 4 o'clock Eastern. So maybe you want to hold him with the hopes that he gets traded somewhere. But if you're desperate, particularly for bench spots with 6 buys, it wouldn't kill me to let him go, folks, at this point in time. And if he does get traded, you kind of wonder how productive will he really be. So that's the Cincinnati Bengals linebacker position. On the edge, Trey Hendrickson sat out with that back injury. He is expected to be back this coming week. Knock on wood. In his absence, Joseph Asai continued to be the top edge. Miles Murphy actually played the second most snaps with 74%. Asai had 77. Shamar Stewart, the rookie, coming back from his ankle injury now, 39% of the snaps. None of them did really much from a stat perspective. All right, let's go to the secondary where Jordan Battle and Geno Stone both played 100% of the snaps. Battle played 81% of the snaps deep. Geno Stone, 63%. One of the things that has helped Battle so much is the 7 players in front of Battle and Stone at safety have really struggled. Maybe Barrett Carter helps a little bit with that, cleans it up. But only 57 snaps playing 81% deep. Battle ended up giving us only 5 tackles. Now, luckily, he did get an interception. So that might have saved your day, particularly in big play scoring systems. But if things improve in front of Battle and Stone, maybe with a few of these changes, and with Flacco giving the team new life and that they think they can be competitive, that could hurt both Battle and Stone's numbers. But it was surprising that Stone only played 63% of the snaps deep, where Battle played 81% deep. Very surprising there. Now, Dax Hill had a disappointing output from a tackle perspective, only getting 3 tackles. What makes him special is when he starts on the outside but moves into the slot in a lot of these 3 wide receiver sets, which is fantastic. The Steelers use a lot of tight ends, if you might have noticed, 2, 3, 4. They'd probably play 5 if they could. But with that, and you have those big hulking tight ends blocking and only on 57 snaps, you should have hopefully anticipated that Dax Hill was not going to have a spectacular output from a IDP perspective. And if you have slot cornerbacks playing against Pittsburgh going forward, as well as outside cornerbacks, you probably want to stay away from playing them that week and look at other alternatives. So the only other thing I'll mention is Cam Taylor-Britt, who did fairly well as I believe it was a cornerback 2 in many scoring systems last year. Cam Taylor-Britt was benched. He was a healthy inactive. He's been truly struggling. DJ Turner has taken over as the number 1 outside cornerback and is playing like a stud. Josh Newton was the other cornerback that on those rare occasions that they did have 3 cornerbacks up there, Josh Newton actually played on the outside as the number 3 cornerback for Cincinnati. All right, let's move on to the Cleveland Browns here, folks. And the Cleveland Browns played 58 snaps against the Miami Dolphins. This was a game that both defenses played less than the average amount, once again, because of the weather, slower pace, more run games, etc. Dylan Gabriel didn't throw it 52 times like he did the week before against Minnesota. So that led to both teams not playing a lot of snaps. It was a blowout game on top of that. And so as it got to around the middle of the fourth quarter, the Browns started benching a lot of their starters. That included Carson Schlesinger, Devin Bush, Tyson Campbell, Grant Delpit, Ronnie Hickman, Myles Garrett, etc. They all got the last part of the fourth quarter off. With that, stats were impacted. Schlesinger only 7 tackles, Devin Bush 6. So that is the context of the game. Be careful. And as I talked about during the Miami section, this was a bad weather game and not a lot of snaps. So be careful about the conclusions you draw. There is one thing I do want to call out, though. Grant Delpit had a sack and a couple of quarterback hits. He played 88% of the snaps close to the line of scrimmage. During the broadcast, they talked about the fact that Myles Garrett said they were being too conservative, and he talked to Jim Schwartz, the defensive coordinator, about being more aggressive. And Delpit blitzed more, and he almost got a sack in the end zone / safety in that game against Tua. So if they continue to use Delpit that way, more aggressive, and particularly against better teams, that could be great news for Grant Delpit. So if someone dropped Delpit and gave up on him with their frustration, as I almost did, because he should be having more tackles given his utilization on the field, this could be really good news for Grant Delpit from LSU. So that is the Browns story. Ronnie Hickman, one more thing for the Browns, 78% of the snaps deep. Miles Harden continues to be the slot corner. That is the Cleveland story. Let us move on to the Pittsburgh Steelers, who played a whopping 76 tackles against the Cincinnati Bengals. And with that, Patrick Queen played 100% of the snaps. So 76 snaps, 11 more than average did this team play. Patrick Queen, yes, he's from LSU, I know. 4 tackles, only one of which was solo. What the heck? That's really kind of, let's just call it extremely inefficient from a tackling perspective. I'll just leave it at that. Pittsburgh continues to frustrate us at this number 2 linebacker position. It's back to the future in terms of this is what they've been doing for years at that number 2 linebacker position. When the year started, it looked like Peyton Wilson might hold on to that number 2 position and play 90% or so of the snaps. Not happening, folks. He only played 43% this week. Cole Holcomb played 55%. Holcomb actually finished second on the team with tackles with 7. Wilson, in his 43%, had 6 tackles. And Queen played basically over double what Wilson had and not quite double what Holcomb played and only had 4 tackles. Come on, Patrick Queen. Let's get it going, dude. But we've seen this from Patrick Queen in the past with some up and down, and this was clearly a down week. On the edge position, I certainly wish this would have happened a week ago when they decided to play Nick Herbert still a whole lot of snaps, and he got 2 sacks the week before, and that ended up costing me a victory, and I was very disappointed about that. Things returned to normal this week, or almost normal, for snap count for the Steelers at the edge position, with Watt playing 82%. Now, Highsmith was only at 70%. He's usually neck and neck with Watt. So he didn't get back all the way up there, but much more than the previous week. Herbig all the way back down to 38%. And with that, Herbig only had 2 tackles and he didn't even know what a sack. He didn't get a quarterback hit. But it's going to be hard to play Herbig now if the Steelers return to this Watt and Highsmith playing the majority of the snaps and Herbig playing less than 40%. Can't count on that. Don't put him in your lineup, folks. Could be a good stash because Highsmith and Watt have had injury problems the last couple of years. So if you have the bench depth or bench space, keep Herbig, but otherwise cut him loose, folks. Connor Haywood, a little bit of a rebound. Now, granted, it was 74% of snaps is what he played on 76 snaps. So a lot of volume there. He did come back with three tackles and got a half a sack. He hasn't had the strongest of years. Shawn and I talked last week a little bit about how maybe the age is finally catching up with him. But right now, probably a low-end 2 kind of defensive tackle in my mind at best is where Cameron Haywood is. Keanu Benton got 3 tackles and a sack, 61% of snaps. I sure would prefer to see Keanu Benton more on the edge than on the nose tackle where they're primarily using him. Maybe if Hayward retires after this year and Benton can move to the outside and Yaya Black, the rookie, moves to nose tackle, that could be very interesting for Benton. But that I don't think that's happening this year unless there's an injury. And then even then, I'm not so sure that'll happen. So maybe next year from Benton. At the safety position, Steelers continue to mess with us. Good news, Deshaun Elliott, 100% of the snaps, 9 tackles, 59% close to line of scrimmage. Love that utilization. He led the team in tackles with those 9. Chuck Clark played 61% of the snaps. Juan Thornhill, 26% of snaps. Still not quite sure what they're trying to accomplish with that number 2 safety position. You need to, just like the number 2 linebacker position for Pittsburgh, you got to stay away from this number 2 safety position unless something becomes much more concrete than what they're doing. At the cornerback position, Jalen Ramsey had another solid week from an IDP perspective, maybe not from a pure football perspective because he got burned quite a bit by Jamar Chase, trying to stick with him. He still played 55% of the snaps close to the line of scrimmage, still finished with 6 tackles and a pass defense. If they continue to utilize him this way and don't have him trying to chase Jamar Chase around in future games or people similar to Jamar Chase, not that there's many, but a number 1 wide receiver type, Jalen Ramsey can still be very productive from an IDP perspective. So that is your Pittsburgh Steelers. Let us move now to the Houston Texans as we move to the AFC South here, folks. And they played 72 snaps against the Seattle Seahawks. And I don't know how somehow early in the fourth quarter they were still in the game because their offense was absolutely atrocious, which of course led to their defense playing 72 snaps, more than average. Once again, at the linebacker position, we have a rotation at the number 2 linebacker position with E.J. Speed playing 67% of the snaps, Henry To'oTo'o playing 60% of the snaps. Speed had much better tackling efficiency with 7 tackles compared to To'oTo'o's 3. Al-Shaair played 100% of the snaps and had 6 tackles and a pass defense and a fumble recovery. But 6 tackles on 72 snaps is not great either for Al-Shaair. We got to stay away from Speed and To'oTo'o right now, folks. Once again, unless you're desperate in deep leagues. Otherwise, you just stay away from them right now. Christian Harris, by the way, played 1 single snap on defense. Not sure why, but he did. Okay, moving to the edge. Will Anderson, Danielle Hunter, 71% of the snaps. Great game for Will Anderson. Of course, got the fumble recovery, got the touchdown in the end zone with the sack and so forth. Great game with 5 tackles go along with that. Danielle Hunter finished with 4 tackles, a quarterback hit. A couple of those kind of later in the game for Hunter. While still am a fan of Hunter, not just because he's an LSU, former LSU player, but the pecking order between the two continues to broaden a little bit with Anderson 1 and Hunter 2, folks. So if you're thinking about them closely, don't think about it that way. I think you got to bump Anderson much more than Hunter right now. Anderson's a 1 from an edge perspective, and Hunter's more of a 2 from an edge perspective right now. At the defensive tackle position, Danico Autry had a couple of big plays as they activated him from IR, including a sack, including blocking a field goal. but he only played 14% of the snaps, 2 tackles. Do I expect that 14% to increase? I absolutely expect that to increase, and it'll come at the expense of Mario Edwards, probably a little bit of Tim Settle as well. But you can't rush to put him into your lineup, and he probably had a big score showing up. If you look at last week's scoring, for your leagues, because of the blocked field goal and the big play and because of the sack, but be careful about jumping on that and putting him in your lineup when he only played 14% of snaps. At the safety position, Kalen Bullock played 96%. Jalen Petrie played 100%. Petrie was second on the team with 8 tackles. MJ Stewart is who I wanted to talk about because basically people were assuming that with Chauncey Gardner-Johnson being released, MJ Stewart becomes the full-time Chauncey Gardner-Johnson role, which was about a 100% role. Well, what happened is Stewart only played 58% of snaps. Of course, Seattle doesn't play a ton of 3 wide, so Jalen Petrie played the safety role with Bullock unless he moved into the slot, and that's when MJ Stewart came into the game. That's probably the most simplistic way of explaining it. So Stewart played 58% of snaps. Once again, you've got to look at who these teams are playing, what their typical alignments are, and what that means from a slot cornerback position or the strong safety position. And this is a situation where Stewart just didn't get the snaps. Luckily, if you did play him, he did force a fumble and did get 6 tackles. So you kind of got bailed out, but you got a lot lucky because of that snap count. Kamari Lassiter, the cornerback, actually had 10 tackles to lead the team, not to mention 3 of those being tackle for loss and a pass defense. He is not afraid to stick his nose in there and tackle. And when a lot of these alignments Seattle are using, like with Cup close to line of scrimmage, sometimes multiple tight ends with Arroyo and Barner, he was close to line of scrimmage, which just made it easy for him to get a lot of these tackles. But Lassiter has done a nice job tackling from the cornerback position. So someone that you can play depending on the matchups. Okay, let's move to the Indianapolis Colts here, folks. Colts played 76 snaps versus the Chargers, got out to a big lead. The Chargers started passing and were in catch-up mode, and Herbert threw for over 400 yards. So that created opportunities for the secondary for sure, but that took away opportunities in the running game, particularly for your linebackers, because they weren't running the ball because they were passing because they were in such catch-up mode for such a big chunk of the game. With that, Zaire Franklin only had 5 tackles. He did get 2 quarterback hits in a pass defense, so some of that might have helped bail you out in scoring, but a low-scoring game for Zaire on those 76 snaps. Big news is at the number 2 linebacker position. We actually got asked a question, and I wish I could give credit to who asked the question. It's slipping my mind right now, and I apologize who that was. But in the start-sit show on Sunday, Shawn and I were asked, is it crazy to believe that Jermaine Pratt might finish the rest of the year with more tackles than Zaire Franklin? And our answer, particularly based on his usage from the first week, was that is not crazy to assume, particularly the way that Franklin has been utilized and the way Pratt stepped in and had a big game and led the team in tackles in his first game. Well, a big change this week. Pratt only played 63% of snaps, down from his 80+% in his first game with the Colts. That led to him having only 4 tackles. In obvious passing situations, they were absolutely pulling him off the field. If that's how they're going to utilize him, that means 65 to 75% of the snaps. That's going to be really risky to play on a weekly basis when you get that kind of snap count. Now, if games are closer and, if you're looking at the games and the lines are like a 1.5, 2.5 kind of thing, that probably means he'll play more because there'll be more running because, it won't be a shootout kind of game, not a blowout type of game. Those opportunities to play Pratt, but otherwise, boy, it's gonna be challenging. It's gonna be really risky as you move forward here. Laiatu Latu continues to shine at the edge position and continues to move up the ladder from an edge position in terms of overall rankings. He's also getting the snap count. So this past week, he got 70% of the snaps. Kwity Paye got 67%. Now, why did that happen? Taekwon Lewis got hurt. Samson Ebukam got hurt. With both of those exiting during the game and not returning to the game, both Latu and Pace snap count were up. Now, Latu only had 3 tackles, but he got 4 quarterback hits, which is really good, and a sack. So his pass rush win rate is fantastic. So we want to keep on using Latu in our leagues. But Kwity Paye, even with all those extra snaps, didn't give us a single tackle and 2 quarterback hits. So after having that phenomenal game the week before, and we talked about exercise caution with Kwity Paye, this is why. Okay. And that was even against Chargers, who had really banged up offensive tackles. I think during the game they mentioned they're on their 6th offensive tackle, and that's who Latu and Paye were kind of going against, the 5th and 6th offensive tackles. So that certainly helped them, don't get me wrong, and the snap count increase helped them. Latu were playing, Paye were not. JT Tuimoloau, and I can't say his name, the rookie out of Ohio State, the 2nd-round pick, sorry for struggle with his name. He only played 29% of the snaps, even with all those injuries. Didn't give us any tackles, but he did get a couple of quarterback hits. Once again, he was playing some pretty weak tackles for the Chargers. DeForest Buckner continues to shine the good news. He came up with 2 sacks this week to go along with 4 quarterback hits, 5 tackles, 2 tackles for loss. Outstanding game. He is a stud. Probably the number 1 defensive tackle out there, as I'm talking off the top of my head. There might be another one I'm slipping not thinking about, but he's the man right now, defensive tackle. If you got him, enjoy him. Yes, Grover Stewart got a pass deflection and interception, which was fantastic. He only had 1 assisted tackle besides that. Don't chase the points that might have come from big play scoring on an interception. Moving to the safety position, let's just talk about defensive backs in general for the Colts. Cam Bynum and Kenny Moore both tied for the lead in tackles with 8. Welcome back, Kenny Moore. But Kenny Moore only played 79% of the snaps. So this has been a trend where he has not been playing 90 for the games he has been active in playing. Of course, he missed games with injuries. He has not been playing in that 90+% range. This is risky to continue to play him. And remember, the Chargers were way behind, throwing the ball a lot. 76 snaps the Chargers played on offense, which means the Colts played on defense. Great that he got the 8 tackles with a pass defense, but boy, in a normal game flow, if he's going to play those kind of snaps and it's not a blowout type of game, Kenny Moore is at risk if that's the kind of snap count they are going to give him. Okay? Travarius Ward, their number 1 cornerback, was placed on IR with concussion. Mekhi Blackman continued to play 100% of the snaps on one side. On the other side, we saw some Jonathan Edwards. We saw Kenny Moore out there somewhat, and we saw some Cameron Mitchell on the field as well, in 4 wide. But the top 3 right now would have to be Blackman, Moore, and Jonathan Edwards. But it was, again, Edwards, while he had 6 tackles, only played 50% of the snaps, so be careful on that. Moving to the Jacksonville Jaguars, who played 70 snaps against the Rams over in London. And I think the Jacksonville Jaguars didn't realize they were playing 2 games overseas. They only decided to play 1 game. Whereas the Rams flew in, a little bit jet lag, didn't affect them, dominated the game, and then flew right back out. So Jacksonville doesn't have an excuse for jet lag or whatever. It was just a poor game for Jacksonville's offense and Trevor Lawrence. But let's talk about their defense. On those 70 snaps, Foye Oluokun played 100% of the snaps, only 2 tackles. I was worried before the year started. I was worried about Foye Oluokun. I actually traded him in one of my favorite leagues because I was just worried with age, new system, what would start happening. And he's had some good games, and he's been bailed out though by getting some bigger plays. He did get 1 pass defense on Sunday against the Rams. But I'm a little bit nervous about Oluokun. I might be testing the trade waters if I can on Oluokun. Of course, Devin Lloyd, talked about him last week, or last 2 weeks I've talked about Devin Lloyd, out with an injury, with that calf injury. Ventrell Miller, who we had left for dead basically, and thought, will it be Miller? Will it be Kaiser? Well, it was Ventrell Miller that took Lloyd snaps. Miller played 87% of the snaps, had 8 total tackles, 5 of which were solo, nothing else from a big play perspective. Jacksonville's going on bye. Lloyd did not get put on injured reserve. That leads me to believe that in week 9, there's a decent probability that Lloyd comes back. Worst case, week 10. So it's hard to pick up Miller when they're going on bye and there's 6 other teams on bye, and you might need the bench spot for someone that's, or the, for the lineup that who's actually going to be playing, depending on how many people you have on bye. But if you can afford it, if you pick him up, know that you maybe get him for one more week in week 9, and then that'll be it. Okay. At the edge position, Josh Hines-Allen got 3 quarterback hits, which is fantastic. Played 66% of the snaps. Would like to see a little bit more, but the way the game went, that probably dictated why he didn't play as much. Only had 1 tackle. I saw him dropped in a league actually earlier today before waivers runs tonight in that league. People are getting really frustrated in his lack of production, not to mention with them going on bye. He's someone, if someone drops in his league, in your league, I think is a sneaky stash, because part of the problem too is across from him where Travon Walker should be, the former number 1 overall pick. Travon Walker broke that wrist, had the surgery for once again, he only played 20 this week, 26% of snaps. That's what he's been playing since he came back from this wrist surgery or whatever, roughly in that range, about a quarter of the snaps. He had 1 assisted tackle. That means more attention can be paid to helping against Hines-Allen, with Walker being limited with that club hand, for lack of a better term. So as Walker gets healthier and can get rid of that club over time, I think that could be good news for Hines-Allen. That's how Ricky sees things. You might disagree. Others might disagree out there, but I'm still holding on to Walker where I can. And if someone dropped Hines-Allen, I am picking him up as well if I can afford to work through the bye week. Moving to the safety position, Eric Murray. I feel like it's my fault that he got hurt because I badmouthed him. He did get hurt with a neck injury, only played 50% of the snaps. Antonio Johnson is who came in his absence. Didn't really do much from a stat perspective, did Antonio Johnson. We're not playing Antonio Johnson if Eric Murray is injured, just to be clear. Andrew Wingard, got 5 tackles. He played 41% close to line of scrimmage. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to do the research to see how much of that changed when Murray went out and Antonio Johnson came in, because Antonio Johnson is not a great deep safety, tends to play closer to the line of scrimmage. So I have a feeling when Murray went out, once again, this is unsubstantiated, I didn't research it, but when Murray went out, Wingard had to play more of that deep safety role, taking him further away from the box, and Johnson got used a little bit more of that role, but Johnson didn't give us the stats we're looking for. Jordan Lewis had a rough game at cornerback. He did have 6 tackles. So from an IDP perspective, he got a pass defense. From an IDP perspective, not that bad considering. But boy, he got torched. He did not have a good game. He's been having a fantastic year. This was not his best outing. I'll just leave it at that. Of course, Devontae Adams would do that to a lot of cornerbacks. Greg Newsome, who they acquired in the Tyson Campbell trade, Tyson Campbell was playing basically, excluding the blowout part, 90+% of the snaps as he went to Cleveland. Greg Newsome's all the way down to 36% of snaps is what he played this past week. So third in terms of total snaps at cornerback. Montaric Brown was first, along with Jordan Lewis. They both basically played 100%. Newsome was third. Travis Hunter only played 14 snaps on defense. You saw how they tried to get him involved in offense. As a side note, people got really excited. Go back and look at the game log and look at how many of those catches and those yards came in the fourth quarter, maybe it was late third in the fourth quarter, when they were in serious catch-up mode because they were being blown out. So that kind of padded his stats. So don't get overexcited about Hunter's offense. And he only played 14 snaps on defense, which was 20% of the snaps, but only 14. That is your Jacksonville Jaguars story, folks. Let's move on to the Tennessee Titans. The Tennessee Titans played 64 snaps against the New England Patriots. Cody Barton played all 100% of those. And Cody Barton only had 4 tackles, only one of which was solo. What is it with some of these linebackers with all these snap counts? I guess week 7 is the week to take off if you're an average linebacker and you play 100% of the snaps on a decent amount of snaps, and you just lay an egg. Cody Barton, Robert Spillane, Patrick Queen, etc. And you'll hear about more as we continue down this show. So Cody Barton, wow. Cedric Gray he is now up to 97% of snaps, led the team in tackles with 10, had a tackle for loss. You can hold on to Cody Barton, but boy, he's performing right now as a low end 3, high end 4 at best right now for you. I'll leave it at that. We'll move on. At the edge position for Tennessee, Fumi Oladejo was put on injured reserve. Arden Key was out with injury. That meant Draymond Jones and Jihad Ward both had to play 75% on snaps on edge, which we like when they play that much. Draymond had 3 tackles, Jihad Ward 4. They both got a sack, which is fantastic. We're not betting on that every day from these 2 gentlemen. And if Tennessee continues to get blown out in their games, that'll create less pass rush opportunities and less opportunities for sacks. So let's not get too excited about Draymond Jones or Jihad Ward. The big news at defensive tackle, Jeffrey Simmons, after playing 19% of the snaps, exited late in the first quarter with a hamstring injury. I saw a quote from a beat writer right before I started recording this, where the coach was basically saying, the defensive coordinator Wilson was saying that others are going to have to step up. That certainly implies that Simmons is not going to play this week. Now, at least there's some good news is that T'Vondre Sweat did come back from IR, and he did have an extremely good game with 6 tackles and a sack. But typically, folks, these big nose tackles, let's just generously say Sweat's around 360 pounds, being generous in terms of on the low side, that is. Most of these nose tackles outside of like a Vita Vea type, they are hard to rely on from an IDP perspective. So glad that Sweat's back from IR. Glad that had a great week, but I don't think we're chasing T'Vondre Sweat, even with Jeffrey Simmons out. Okay. At the safety position, the 3-headed rotation monster continues for the Titans with Hooker at 83%, Woods at 67%, Quandre Diggs at 66%. Now, Diggs actually was second on the team in tackles with 7 on those 66% of snaps. But, folks, I didn't even bother doing the research about their alignment. If they're playing these kind of snap counts and rotations, we're not playing these guys. So I would hold Hooker on my bench. The other 2, I certainly wouldn't. And Hooker would be in deep leagues to keep him. Kevin Winston, who I keep on hoping for to get more playing time, doubled his playing time. He went from 1 snap to 2 snaps week over week. But in that 1 snap, he did blitz and he got a quarterback hit. I was excited to see that, and I was waiting. I wonder how many snaps he played. It was 2, though. That was the only time I saw him on the field, and he got a quarterback hit. So very disappointing, but even if he works into the rotation, it does look like it's a rotation, so we won't be able to trust the talented rookie. Roger McCreary continues to be their slot cornerback. He did have 6 tackles. It was only on 52% of the snaps. Jalen Armour Davis, 1 starting cornerback. We've talked about him in previous weeks. L'Jarius Sneed left with a quad injury. Darrell Baker Jr. is who replaced him. Darrell Baker Jr. is someone who could be targeted quite a bit in the future. That's all I'll say. I'm not saying go play him yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if next week we're looking at Darrell Baker having 6 tackles in the pass defense because he got thrown at so much and he had a lot of tackle opportunities. All right, that completes the AFC South. Let's move to the AFC West, and let's talk about the Denver Broncos here. The Denver Broncos played 77 snaps against the Giants, which I have to admit was one heck of a fun game to watch. The back and forth, particularly in the fourth quarter. Maybe I should say the fourth quarter was fun to watch. I'm not so sure the first part of the game was. But with that being said, Alex Singleton, 8 tackles on 77 snaps. Not that great from an efficiency perspective, but not bad. I'd prefer to see in the 14% range, not just a little bit above 10%. Dre Greenlaw comes back from injured reserve. Fantastic news. On only 21 snaps, has 6 tackles. Now, granted, one was solo, but 6 tackles on 21 snaps. That's pretty freaking impressive. Boy, if that efficiency can continue, holy cow. Not likely. In the second half, he did not play. They talked about him being on a snap count. They actually didn't lie about that. And Justin Sterner played the second half. He did get 5 tackles, including an interception, which I think I could have intercepted that pass, but I digress. So you're thinking, okay, Greenlaw plays great on those 27 snaps in the first half. They're going to ramp him up next game. Oh, no. What does Trey Greenlaw do? In a game that they won with such excitement, he goes running after the referee for some strange, stupid reason. They throw a flag even though the game is over and they're celebrating, blah, blah. The referee throws a flag and picks it up, and he gets suspended for this coming week. So guess what? No Dre Greenlaw again this coming week, and we'll have to wait and see an extra game. Will he get to that 100% mark, and can we really play him? So that's probably another 2 weeks we'll have to wait before we really feel comfortable putting him into our lineups. What a bonehead. Okay, so Sterner will probably play, I don't know, let's call it 75 to 83% of the snaps in the coming week. And with 6 teams on bye, maybe he's someone you can use as a result. That's the one good thing is you get clarity on being able to use Sterner this coming week. At the edge position, surprisingly, Nick Bonito didn't get a sack because a lot of other people got half a sack or a sack or a sack and a half. Bonito was not one of them. We're not going to let that phase as we keep on playing Nick Bonito. Jonathan Cooper, a sack and a half. Dondre Tillman, a sack. Q Robinson, who was active with the injury from Jonah Ellis being out again with a shoulder and rib situation. Q Robinson, the rookie out of Alabama who had just been shining, he got in there with half a sack. All those latter guys also had 3 tackles as well. So if Bonito gets hurt, if Cooper gets hurt, their backups, whether it be Tillman, Ellis, Robinson, I think you'll be able to play them with confidence as we go forward. So just keep that in mind. If one of those two, hopefully they don't get hurt, but if they do, they being Bonito and Cooper, these backups have opportunities for you. Zach Allen, all the way down to 70% of the snaps. Now, because they played 77 snaps in total, the defense did, he still played a healthy 54 snaps. Got you 4 tackles and a half a sack and a couple of pass defenses and a couple of quarterback hits. So we're still playing Zach Allen. He's still the number 1 defensive tackle. Hopefully that snap count gets back up into the 80% range, particularly when they're playing less snaps. Malcolm Roach returned from injured reserve. 51% of the snaps is what he played. He got 5 tackles, and he got a half a sack. But Malcolm Roach is someone from history. We know that we're not chasing from a defensive tackle position. So don't get excited if you see Malcolm Roach. Don't go chasing that, folks. At the safety position, Hufanga played 99% of the snaps. Brandon Jones got banged up later in the game on a deep pass. So he ended up only playing 87% of the snaps. He's still tied for second on the team in tackles with 6. Ironically, that was with Dre Greenlaw, only played half the game in only the first half. But from a lineup positioning perspective, Hufanga played 63% deep, 37% close to the line of scrimmage. Brandon Jones only played 54% of the deep while he was in 46% close to the line of scrimmage. So given that Brandon Jones has a slight edge over Hufanga, there's been some rotations throughout the year so far, but Brandon Jones has tended to play a little bit more overall close to the line of scrimmage than Hufanga has. We'll have to wait and see and learn more about Jones's injury, the severity, and is there any impacts to the coming week. But that's why you want to tune into our Start Sit show on Sunday morning, because we're going to help you with that kind of knowledge and information and help you with your Start Sit questions, both on IDP and offense, 11 a.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Central for 1 hour on Sunday morning. Okay, that concludes the Denver Broncos. Oh, sorry. Jaquan McMillan only played 48% of the snaps. Jahdae Barron, 22%. So you still can't play either one of those and trust them right now. Now we're done with Denver, and let's move to Kansas City. Okay, I don't know how to describe that horrendous game that the Las Vegas Raiders played. They're right up there with Tennessee and the Jets. at least for this 1 week. It's hard to fathom that the Raiders offense could only force the Chiefs to be on defense for 35 snaps. The average for a game is 65. We talk about there's been a couple in the last few weeks where it was like a couple outliers, like 43 snaps, 45. Those are real freaking outliers. But 35, I mean, that's over the top outlier bad. So with that, as you would expect, there wasn't much stats for the Chiefs players. And in fact, because it was such a blowout, Nick Bolton, as one example, only played 71% of the snaps. So 71% of 35, that left him with basically 25 snaps played. You're not going to get many IDP counting stats. That's why you only end up with 2 total tackles in this kind of game. So it impacted Connor, who we've loved. It impacted Karlaftis. I mean, Tranquil. I mean, you name it. It impacted them all. I don't know what to say except for depending on who the Raiders playing, if they're playing a really good offense, their defense is going to rack up stats. But that team with the good offense, be careful about playing their defensive players. I'll just leave it at that. That was horrendous. That's all we can really talk about on Kansas City side. Now on the Raiders side, we have a little bit more to talk about because they ended up playing 81 snaps on defense. I don't recall, and I am older, so maybe my memory bank is shot, but 4 players on the Raiders had double-digit tackles. 4. This game didn't go to overtime. 4. Landon Roberts played 93% of the snaps. That's not good. If you would have seen him trying to out in coverage, if you go back and watch the game somehow, watch it, Landon Roberts trying to cover. Not pretty. But he was on the field 93% of the snaps. That was 75 in total. So he finished with 18 tackles. Devin White played 100% of those snaps. Bet you he was tired too. He had 16 tackles, did get a quarterback hit. Let's go to safety position. Jeremy Chin and Isaiah Polamau both had 10 tackles. Wow. When your safeties are getting 10 tackles apiece, that's probably not a good sign. Okay. Now, Malcolm Kuntz played 57% of the snaps and came up with 6 tackles. So that is a highlight game for him so far this year. Not sure if we can count on that. Now, the Raiders are going into a bye, and I'm thrilled for that because Max Crosby got a banged up knee and ankle on one of these low blocks that it sounded like, according to the referee who they use in the booth to help clarify the rules, when the announcers aren't sure. He talked about that probably should have been a penalty. The good news is they've left him out for precaution. He had no reason to throw him back in there in this kind of freaking blowout game. But he now has the bye week also to heal and not try and play through these injuries as he tried to do with that high ankle sprain for a good while last year, which really impacted his productivity. So hopefully when the Raiders come back in week 9, Crosby's close to 100% at least, and we can play him like we normally do. Which means Tyree Wilson probably won't play 70% of the snaps as he did in this game, and Kuntz probably won't play as high as 57% of the snaps. Jonah Laulu continues to do very well the defensive tackle position with 3 tackles and 2 pass defense and a quarterback hit. Thomas Booker played the second most snaps of defensive tackle with 64%. Of course, they acquired him from Philadelphia right before the season started. He played the second most snaps of defensive tackle this week, as I was saying, and he ended up with 6 tackles, but not chasing Thomas Booker's 6 tackles, folks. Don't even want to talk about the cornerbacks. So that's it for Vegas. Let's move on to the LA Chargers. And the LA Chargers ended up playing only 60 snaps against the Colts. Deion Henley played 100% of the snaps. And remember when I talked about number 1 linebackers taking the week off? The Cody Bartons, the Patrick Queens. Well, Deion Henley kind of did the same with 2 unassisted tackles. Jonathan Taylor tends to run the ball a lot. You would think there would be more tackle opportunities for that linebacker, but apparently there wasn't. And Denzel Perryman was activated from IR. Troy Dye was spotted on the sideline before the game with a cast on his thumb and was inactive for the game. Perryman, with all those snaps, well, 70%, not a ton, he only had 3 tackles as well. Not a good game for the Chargers linebackers. Surely, I haven't had a chance to go back and fully study this game, but surely it has something to do with the Colts and how they ran the ball more towards the edges, how they threw the ball more. I mean, Alex Pierce had a good game, Tyler Warren had a good game, Pittman had a good game. That had to be what happened, folks. So we're going to hopefully call this an outlier for Henley. A lot of people drafted Henley as a number 1 linebacker in leagues, and I was one of those that drafted him as a number 1 linebacker in one of my leagues. He's not giving me those number 1 numbers. He's performing more as I call it a number 2 linebacker. We're not benching him yet. Don't lose the faith, but just a disappointing week. Khalil Mack, moving to the edge position, returned from injured reserve, clearly was being eased back into action. Only had 2 tackles, but he did get a sack. So if you took a chance for whatever reason and you were that desperate and played him, hopefully that sack in a big play scoring league bailed you out. Tuli Tuipulotu, 82% of the snaps, led the team there, had 1 tackle, 1 quarterback hit. So outside of that big game where he had those 4 sacks, not much to speak of for Tuli T. Bud Dupree had 63% of the snaps, Odafe Owe 48%. So surprisingly, Dupree played more snaps than Owe, even though Owe had the sack the week before. And with Mack coming back, that's going to push Owe down to like the number 4 edge position for the Chargers. So I don't think we can play Owe. So hoping that the trade would free him does not look like it's going to happen. At the safety position, Derwin James played 100% of the snaps, played 70% close to the line of scrimmage. We love that. He only had 7 tackles. We'd like to have a little bit more from a Derwin James. 2 quarterback hits, which was nice, though. At the other safety position, just like they did with Elijah Moden and Lloyd Gilman. Of course, Lloyd Gilman was traded away. Elijah Moden was inactive. He, too, has a thumb injury and had a cast on his thumb. So he and Troy Dye. Interesting to see how they pick each other's nose together, something like that. I don't know. That's trying to have a bad joke, and it did not come through. But Jefferson and Mickens, the 2 of them, rotated at the safety position. Jefferson, 82% of snaps, Mickens, 55%. It would have been nice if they played Jefferson closer to 100%. They did not. He still had 6 tackles, and Mickens had 5. We're not chasing R.J. Mickens for sure, folks. In deep leagues, Jefferson, maybe you can play, but he does play a decent amount of snaps deep as well with James close to the line of scrimmage. So not really chasing Jefferson either, to be honest. Just, stay away from that. All right, that's your LA Chargers story. We're now going to move to the NFC, and we're going to move to the NFC East, and we're going to move to the Dallas Cowboys. And the Dallas Cowboys ended up playing 67 snaps against the Washington Commanders. Kenneth Murray played 100% of the snaps, and for the first time in, 5 or 6 weeks, he actually had at least as many tackles as the number 2 linebacker. Usually the number 2 linebacker, whoever that's been for the Cowboys, has had more tackles than Murray. This week, that didn't happen. Murray got 9 tackles, a couple tackles for loss, and he got a sack. So one of these number 1s that actually did better than expected as opposed to worse than expected, like your Cody Bartons, Deion Henleys, Robert Spillane's. Okay, you get it. Shamar James appears to have taken, for now, the number 2 linebacker spot next to Kenneth Murray. Of course, Murray is wearing the green dot. James played 99% of the snaps, had 9 tackles. He had a couple of quarterback hits and a sack as well, just like Murray did. What that meant for Jack Sanborn, total snaps played on defense, goose egg, 0, nada, silch, nothing. Sanborn didn't play a snap on defense. Maris Lufau only played 15% of the snaps on defense. DeMarvion Overshown, today on Tuesday, October 21st, the 21-day window for him was open. Expecting in mid-November, after the Cowboys bye, that DeMarvion Overshown will start playing. What that means for Murray, what that means for James, not sure at this point in time. There's no clues, no indications, but there's a lot of games to be played. There's more injuries that can be happening. But what I would tell you is if you can stash him, Maybe it's not this week. Maybe you wait another week. But I'm trying to pick up Overshown, and I'm trying to stash him if there was no injured reserve slots. I know there's a lot of buys. I know this could be hard to do. That's why I said maybe you wait another week. But Overshown is someone I'm going to want on my team, particularly as we get into December and particularly mid-December. At the edge, Izuruku, the rookie from Boston College, Donovan Izuruku, 55% of the snaps, the only one that played more than 50% of snaps on the edge. And there were five players for the Cowboys that played snaps on the edge. Sam Williams, Jadeveon Clowney, Dante Fowler, James Houston. That was the order in which, in terms of most to least snaps played. Izuruku had 4 tackles, and he did get a sack, which is fantastic. I think it was from chasing a quarterback out of bounds. So not sure that I feel that great about that. Don't quote me on that, but I think that's what happened. Now, Jadeveon Clowney, granted, was only 39% of the snaps, but he did have 5 tackles, a couple of pass defenses, a fumble recovery, a sack. So Jadeveon Clowney did have a very, very nice game for the Cowboys. Do we see his snap count start to increase? To be determined. With 6 teams on bye, I'm not sure I'm picking him up this week, but maybe going into the following week, he's someone that I'm potentially looking at stashing where you have to play an edge player there. Kenny Clark played 64% of the snaps. He didn't do good from a stat perspective. I'll leave it at that. Moving to the safety position with Malik Hooker on IR. Week before, Wanye Thomas stepped in his position, and Wanye Thomas played most of his snaps deep, and Donovan Wilson played close to the line of scrimmage. Wanye Thomas was ruled out before the game. It's reported that it was migraines that had him out. He missed practice on Friday, and then they ruled him out. So that's a really bad migraine. I've never had true migraines. I heard they're really painful if you get them, and I feel bad for the guy, but he ended up missing the game and missing out on an opportunity. As a result, Marquise Bell, who you may recall a couple of years ago, the Cowboys tried to turn him from a safety into a linebacker and use his speed closer to the line of scrimmage. Didn't work out so well. He's now been moved back to his normal position, safety. He's the number 4 safety for the Cowboys, but with Hooker on IR and Thomas missing, Marquise Bell started, and he played much closer to the line of scrimmage than Wanye Thomas did. Bell played 51% of the snaps close to the line of scrimmage, whereas Thomas was in the 33% range, I believe it was. Somewhere along those lines, close to the line of scrimmage, so big difference. That meant Donovan Wilson didn't play as much close to the line of scrimmage, but he only played 58% deep to Donovan Wilson, but yet he only had 1 tackle on 67 snaps. Come on, Donovan Wilson. Another one of these yo-yo safeties that through the years, like an Eric Murray, for example, it's like, they pull you in, they frustrate you, you dump them, then they try and pull you in again. So this is one of those frustrating weeks for Donovan Wilson. At the cornerback position, Reddy Stewart had been fairly productive playing the slot position role for the Cowboys. Well, let's just say he didn't play any snaps on defense this week. It ended up being Elam and Bland as the 2 starting cornerbacks. And then when there was a need to go to 3 wide, Bland moved into the slot. Trikweze Bridges moved into the outside. So while Reddy Stewart might have done well for us from a IDP perspective, he must have not been doing well from a NFL team perspective. So that's what happened in the Cowboys cornerback position. If Bland starts playing more and more slot, particularly as Trevon Diggs comes back, he missed the game because of a concussion, there's a chance we start seeing much better stats from Bland. And he had 7 tackles in this game and got that pick 6, which was fantastic. But don't go overboard chasing Bland thinking, he's back. It's not quite there yet, folks. All right, let's move on to the New York Giants, who played 81 snaps against the Denver Broncos. And with that, Bobby Okereke played 100% of the snaps. In those 100% of the snaps, Okereke, 81 snaps, folks, 16 more than average. Basically, almost another full quarter. Came out with 6 tackles. Darius Muasau played 89% of the snaps. He had 6 tackles. Muasa's playing in Micah McFadden role, and whenever he gets a chance where he's playing 80+% of the snaps in your deeper leagues, he can be used as a linebacker 4. Once again, matchups are critical for that. Moving to the edge position, Thibodeau 70% snaps, Burns 69%, Abdul Carter 65%. Thibodeau had 1 assisted tackle. Burns had another great game with 2 sacks, but he also hurt his ankle during the game, and he tried to, well, I shouldn't say tried to. He came back into the game, played through that hurt ankle, but you may recall he got called for offsides because there was a long pass play by Denver, and they outran to the line of scrimmage to spike it late in the game. Burns couldn't get back fast enough because of that bad ankle and was in the neutral zone when they snapped it, and it was offsides called on Burns. He was in a walking boot after the game. We love ourselves some Brian Burns. He's having a phenomenal year. But that ankle injury, we're going to have to monitor this week. And even if he plays, he might be limited. So keep your expectations on the lower side. Abdul Carter got some stats on his playing time. 3 tackles, one of which was solo. Didn't really get any quarterback sacks. His pass rush win rate continues to improve according to PFF. So shout out to PFF for when I use these stats. But he's still not giving us the type of production we need to play him on a regular basis. Dexter Lawrence disappoints on 68% of the snaps. I mean, so 55 snaps is what he ended up playing because they played so many total snaps on defense at the Giants. He got 1 assisted tackle. He did get a pass defense. He did get a quarterback hit. We were hoping we were starting to see some signs of life last week, but not good. If you have other options, you need to start considering him at this point for Dexter Lawrence in his stead. Moving to the safety position, Javon Holland hurt his knee during the game. Dane Belton came in and took his spot. Was interesting. Holland, before he left on his 28% of the snaps, played 87% deep. Belton only played 52% of the snaps deep, 48% of the close line of scrimmage. Newman played 53% deep, 47% close to the line of scrimmage. I think, and haven't been able to check, that once Holland went out, Newman ended up playing a little bit more deep. Belton took more of the snaps close to the line of scrimmage. That's not great news for Newman. It's great news for Dane Belton if this continues, if Holland is out. Belton, 10 tackles to lead the team, phenomenal. Bye weeks, if Holland's out, and with this usage, Belton in deeper leagues is someone that you can consider playing here, and know that if you have Newman versus some other safeties, Newman might be the one you sit, particularly if Holland is out. Okay. Moving the cornerback position, Drew Phillips, 9 tackles, second on the team behind Belton's 10. Got to play 84% of the snaps. Broncos used a lot of 3 wides. We saw a lot of Franklin. We saw a lot of Marvin Mims. We saw a lot of Pat Bryant. Obviously, we saw a lot of Courtland Sutton. Drew Phillips was on the field a lot, and that ended up with 9 tackles. So, once again, teams you're playing against, when you're looking at slot cornerbacks, is critical for their opportunities to bring us IDP points. At the cornerback position, Paulson and Debo left after playing 53% of the snaps. That was a good chunk of the way of the third quarter because so much happened late third and through the fourth quarter. Ton of snaps in the fourth quarter in particular. That meant Deonte Banks played 47% of the snaps in the game as he went in for a Debo. When he left, he being a Debo, left the game, the Giants hadn't basically given up any points to the Broncos. The Broncos scored 33 points after that when Deonte Banks was in. Now, am I trying to blame everything on Deonte Banks? Absolutely not. But that's how much Adebo means to this Giants defense, Ricky's humble opinion. If Adebo is out, we're not chasing Deonte Banks. He didn't put up the stats considering he played almost half of the snaps, folks. So Drew Phillips in the right matchup. Adebo, if he's healthy, but stay away from the rest of these cornerbacks. That is your Giants story. Let's move on to the Philadelphia Eagles, who played a very nice 69 snaps against the Minnesota Vikings. And Zach Bond ended up playing 100% of the snaps, led the team in tackles with 10. Very excited. He only played 14% of the snaps on the D line, which is even more exciting. And I think this is good news for Bond going forward. And what I think is the reason for that good news is because Nakobe Dean returned and he played 45% of the snaps. In that 45% of the snaps, he had 6 tackles, including a tackle for loss. Shahad Campbell ended up playing 87% of the snaps. But Campbell ended up playing 47% of the snaps on the D line. With the Eagles unable to generate a pass rush and with Nakobe Dean returning, they now can move Campbell to the edge and continue to develop him as they work towards really peaking toward playoff time. Dean is going to get more and more snaps on the inside next to Bowen. The reason it's good news for Bowen is I think Bowen will play a lot less on the edge with Campbell moving out there on a more regular basis. Not to mention Brandon Graham coming out of retirement at age 37. That'll give more snaps on the edge for another defensive end that the Eagles will have confidence in. Now, granted, they can ramp up Graham, but I think this means good news for Bowen playing more in the box, Nakobe Dean more in the box. Really bad news for Jihad Campbell. Really bad news for him from a tackle efficiency. If you're wondering why he only had 3 tackles, that is why, most likely, because on that 87% of snaps, basically half of the snaps he played were on the edge. And by the way, he didn't get any quarterback hits or a sack, did Jihad Campbell. Shawn and I talked about this several weeks ago, that this is how we thought it would play out, and it sure looks like it's playing out that way. If you have questions about Brandon Graham, no, we're not chasing a 37-year-old coming out of retirement who is not an IDP stud to begin with at his age and as in the latter part of his career. Jalix Hunt had the pick 6, which was fantastic. Kind of probably bailed you out. Had a couple of quarterback hits, but he only had 1 assisted tackle to go along with that. So his numbers are going to look good from an IDP points perspective because that pick 6, but only 1 assisted tackle. Josh Uche did get a sack, but we're not chasing Josh Uche on only 48% of the snaps. And there's a reason they tried to get Zadarius Smith over and he retired. There's a reason that they pulled Brandon Graham out of retirement. We're not chasing Uche or Patrick Johnson. As a side note, Azeez Ojulari hurt his hamstring after 4 snaps. At the defensive tackle position for Philadelphia, Jalen Carter, 97% of the snaps. That's phenomenal for a defensive tackle. Incredible. 3 tackles and a couple of quarterback hits. Boy, if he could turn these quarterback hits into sacks. We're not giving up on Jalen Carter, and we still love Jordan Davis. 65% of the snaps, 3 tackles, a tackle for loss, quarterback hit. We're still in on Jordan Davis, folks. So we like him even more when Jalen Carter isn't there. But right now, Jordan Davis is still someone we're willing to play as a defensive tackle in those required leagues. Blankenship and Makuba played 100% of the snaps at safety. They played deep a lot. Not much to talk about there. They didn't generate much stats. Makuba did get an interception, but yeah, really don't want to play either one of those 2. Good news, Quinion Mitchell returned. Cooper DeJean returned to playing 70% of his snaps close to the line of scrimmage. Second on the team in tackles with 8. And not to mention the pass defense. Great game for Cooper DeJean. We keep on playing him. And that would take care of Philadelphia. Let's now move on to Washington, who played 67 snaps against the Cowboys. As I record the timestamps, it was a blowout game. So even Bobby Wagner did not play his typical 100% of the snaps. He did lead the team with 8 tackles, but only played 90% of the snaps. Frankie Louvu, we need to talk about him because he played 48% of the snaps on the D-line. That's a lot even for him. The reason Dorrance Armstrong left after only 4 snaps with a knee injury, he came into the game battling a hamstring injury, hurt his knee. It was announced today it was season ending, so Armstrong is out for the year. If you are a Frankie Louvu owner, this is bad news. With losing Dietrich Wise earlier, losing Dorrance Armstrong now, they signed Preston Smith off the scrap heap. Von Miller Still has some pass rush moves, but at his age, you're not going to play him 65, 70% of the snaps. That could mean Luvu, particularly in pass rush situations, is getting a lot more usage on the line of scrimmage as would happen in this pass game, which would be bad news for his IDP stats. If you think he was sack or bust before, he's going to be even more sack or bust. So if you put him into your lineups, know that is a huge risk. With that, Jacob Martin played 78% of the snaps on the edge, so he led the team on the edge, and he had 4 tackles and half a sack, and he had 3 quarterback hits. Jacob Martin is someone who has periodically displayed decent pass rushing skills and has gotten a sack every now and then. His IDP stats are probably going to increase somewhat simply because he's going to be on the field so much. He did have 4 assisted tackles in this game, so not a ton of solo tackles. But in your deepest of leagues, if you have injury situations, bye situations, he's someone that potentially you can play because I don't know who else is going to play on the edge with him on a regular basis. Deron Payne, another phenomenal game on only 54% of the snaps, 5 tackles and 3 pass defenses and a quarterback hit to boot. Deron Payne is playing some inspired football. He's someone you can continue to play as a defensive tackle in those required leagues. At the safety position, we had a little bit of a mess there. Jeremy Reeves, 87%, Darnell Savage, 69%, Quan Martin, 60%. Some of this was also impacted by the blowout game. But let's talk about positioning of these safeties. 87% of the snaps for Jeremy Reeves, 74% of those snaps were close to the line of scrimmage. We like that, even though he only had 4 tackles. Quan Martin, on his snaps, played 70% deep. Not thrilled with that, and we were actually hoping that Martin would actually play maybe more closer to the line of scrimmage and Reeves would play more deeper, or maybe even Savage. Didn't happen. Savage, in the snaps he played 63% deep. So in other words, the only one of those 3 that played more than 50% of the snaps close to the line of scrimmage was Jeremy Reeves. So he's playing that Will Harris role, which was the Jeremy Chin role from last year. So he's someone you can chance playing, but know that he's not the Jeremy Chin type. You know, he's been more of a special teams guy through his years, has Jeremy Reeves been. So no, you're not going to get these elite periodic 10, 12 tackle kind of games out of Jeremy Reeves. We'll leave it at that. Okay, at the cornerback position, the only thing to mention is Jonathan Jones came off of IR and Noah Igbenamane became the 5th cornerback as opposed to the 4th cornerback. Sainer still was the number 3 cornerback. He only played 67% of the snaps. That obviously impacted his IDP numbers. Let's move on to the Chicago Bears. The Chicago Bears played against my lowly New Orleans Saints, and they only had to play 56 snaps on defense. The good news is Tremaine Edmonds continues to incredibly shine, his best year of his career. 9 tackles to lead the team, including yet another interception for Edmonds and a sack. He's having a phenomenal year. There's no indications that this won't continue. TJ Edwards wore the green dot, a 2nd on the team in tackles with 7, plus a couple of pass defenses to boot. Edmonds in this Dennis Allen defense has been unleashed. Something that if Pete Werner was maybe as talented as Tremaine Edmonds, maybe Werner could have done more of when Dennis Allen was the head coach and defense coordinator for the Saints. I digress a little bit. We'll talk about Werner more a little bit later. But Tremaine Edmonds, he's playing as a number 1 linebacker, folks. People might be hesitant to rank him there in weekly rankings, but that's where he deserves to be. And TJ Edwards, we're not shying away from playing him either. So high end number 2 linebacker for TJ Edwards. So that's your Bears linebackers. At defensive end, Montez Sweat, for the 2nd week in a row, has a pretty decent outing. And one of the things that Shawn regularly calls out, and rightfully so, is Montez Sweat tends to be sack or bust. But this week, he got 4 solo tackles, 2 of which were a tackle for loss, plus a couple of quarterback hits, and a sack with a forced fumble. So Sweat had a fantastic game. If he can continue with this kind of production, giddy up with Montez Sweat. The question is, will he really continue this? Was this the New Orleans Saints? Was this Spencer Rattler really struggling on the road, just like he did when they played at Seattle? And did that help Sweat to be productive? I don't know who Chicago plays next week. Sorry, I don't have the info up, and I didn't check. Sorry about that. But if he's playing a Cam Ward type, yeah, I'm probably playing Montez Sweat. I'll leave it at that. If he's playing a Patrick Mahomes, no, I'm not playing Montez Sweat. Okay, moving on to the safety position, because there's not much to talk about a defensive tackle other than, yes, Gervin Dexter got a fumble recovery, but he only had one assisted tackle besides that. Jaquan Brisker was basically even 50-50 between deep and close to line of scrimmage. Had 6 tackles and a sack. Very nice blitz off the edge. In fact, he had another quarterback hit during the game besides that one. That's the Jaquan Brisker we wanted to see, and that's how we want to see him used in this Dennis Allen defense. Kevin Byard played 82% deep. He did get an interception, which kind of helped his stats, thankfully, because he only had 2 tackles, did Byard. Rattler threw a YOLO, and I was like yelling at the TV, don't throw it, don't throw it. You could see it coming, and sure enough, Byard had an easy interception. Okay, enough about trashing my Saints. At the cornerback position, though, Kyler Gordon starting to play that Alante Taylor Ugo Madi role now that he's healthy. That was so successful with Dennis Allen and the Saints last year, now being used with the Bears. 75% of the snaps played, 4 tackles only. He got a sack. Now remember, the Bears only played 56 snaps, and the Saints struggled, but he was basically their full-time slot cornerback. In other matchups, this is really good news. Really excited. This is part of the reason why I thought Kyler Gordon would be a number 1 cornerback this year. I actually had him predicted to be the number 1 cornerback. That was before all the injuries started in the preseason and all. But he has a chance to be a really top cornerback in the second half of the year if he can stay healthy, if Dennis Allen uses him like he did those New Orleans Saints cornerbacks last year. All right. That is your Chicago Bears. Let us move on to the Detroit Lions, who played 69 snaps versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on Monday Night Football. Now, Detroit has a bye coming up in Week 8, which will certainly help their secondary hopefully get a little bit healthy, and we'll come back to that. Jack Campbell, 100% of the snaps, 8 total tackles. Anzalone, a disappointing 4 tackles. Derek Barnes, on 88% of the snaps, continues to make things happen, particularly on that outside linebacker Sam/edge role that he plays. Part of that is helpful when he's on the opposite side of Aiden Hutchinson, who demands so much attention. But he had 5 tackles and a sack and a pass defense. So Derek Barnes in deeper leagues is someone you can continue to play, folks. All right. Moving to the edge position, Aiden Hutchinson. He did play 91% of the snaps, but boy, he came close so many times to having a shot at Baker. But Baker stepped around and worked around and did a really nice job. Disappointing that he didn't continue his sack trend that he had been having over the last several weeks, but I'm not worried about it. He'll be back after the bye. Al-Qadim Muhammad, all the way up to 68% of the snaps, did get half a sack this week, which gave him credit for an assisted tackle, and that's all he did this week. So great that he played so much, bad that he didn't have much productivity. People are going to be excited. They're going to see Tyrus Wheat, holy cow, 3 tackles and a sack and a half. Holy crap, you're going to see a rush. They're going to be thinking, oh, he must be the guy that's playing across from Hutchinson. We got to pick him up. He played 9 total snaps. So don't go rushing to the waiver wire for Tyrus Wheat. Remember, he's been kicked to the curbside by Dallas. He was on the Lions practice squad for a while. This is not a stud we're talking about here, folks, with Tyrus Wheat. Don't go chasing that. At defensive tackle, Aleem McNeil, 64% of the snaps in his first game back after being activated from IR. Didn't do much in the stat column, but you could see the impact he was having on the field when he did play, pushing the pocket. They even talked about him, the announcers did during the game. He can be a number 2, low-end 2 defensive tackle, but let's see him get back into the swing of things a little bit more before we're putting him into our lineups or maybe even onto our rosters. At the defensive back position for the Lions, Branch was out with suspension. Kirby Joseph out with injury. Avonte Maddox out with injury. Terry and Arnold out with injury. DJ Reed's on injured reserve. And with that, they still did a phenomenal job on defense against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, whose offense has been really tough to stop this year. Shout out to Kelvin Shepard, the defensive coordinator. Oh, he's from LSU as well. He was a linebacker at LSU. I digress. But Eric Hallett tied for the team lead in tackles with Jack Campbell with 8 tackles on 93% of the snaps. Thomas Harper played the other safety position, starting in the absence of Brant and Joseph. He only had 3 tackles, but he had a big pass defense late in the game. Needless to say, we don't need to chase those guys because Branch and Joseph and hopefully Maddox will be back in the safety position, and those guys will be returning to the bench. So we won't be chasing those guys. Okay? That's really the Detroit Lions story, folks. And let's move to the Green Bay Packers. And the Green Bay Packers ended up playing 76 snaps versus the Arizona Cardinals. And folks, I've been talking for an hour and a half straight. I've got to get me some water. So hold for a second, please. Don't go anywhere. Don't go anywhere. All righty, I'm back. I needed that desperately. Quay Walker got banged up, missed a few snaps, still played 89% of the snaps, which is great when your team plays 76 on defense. Still led the team with 9 tackles, 3 quarterback hits, and a sack and a half. We talked on one of our shows how Jacoby Brissett is a little bit of a statue in the pocket, and that played out as we'll talk about a little bit more. Edgerrin Cooper only finished with 5 tackles. He did play 97% of the snaps, so it's not from not playing a lot of snaps. A lot of people, including myself, I drafted Edgerrin Cooper as a number 1 linebacker in one of my leagues. They are just not using him as they did last year, including how they rushed the passer with him. And with the acquisition of Micah Parsons, they haven't had a need. So he's been okay, but we're not getting that value that we're hoping to get out of Edgerrin Cooper. And Quay Walker in this contract year is having a phenomenal year. It's going to cost the Packers more money by not re-upping him to this point. At the edge position, Micah Parsons. I talked about the Brissett statue. And Micah Parsons, we knew he was due for a big game, and here it was. Now, I wasn't expecting 3 sacks, but 5 tackles, 5 quarterback hits, and 3 sacks. Yeah, that'll win you games, and that's why you never sit your stud edge players. Okay. Every once in a while, like Myles Garrett, we talked about him earlier, didn't have the biggest of games, but boy, when they hit, they really hit. And Micah Parsons was a massive boom this week. Rashawn Gary, we talked about he was due for a sack. We talked about the fact that with the Cardinals, with their statue quarterback and so-so offensive line, that Gary had a possibility of getting a sack. And I believe my man Shawn Teague actually called it that he would get a sack, and Shawn was spot on that Gary got a sack and got a forced fumble as well. So shout out to Shawn for that call, by the way. But another reason to listen to our Start Sit show on Sunday mornings and come to it, in addition to our IDP Plus advice show, there's probably some things you're going to hear that's going to result in changes to your starting lineup. I encourage you guys to come to that Start Sit show, 11 a.m. Eastern Time, 10 a.m. Central, for 1 hour on Sunday mornings. Moving to the defensive tackle position, Colby Wooden. We've seen this once before. He did play 55% of snaps, had a great game with 6 tackles, including a tackle for loss, but we're not chasing Colby Wooden's stats, folks. Don't fall for it. Don't go for it. We are moving on. At the safety position, ironically, Xavier McKinney, Evan Williams, Javon Bullard all had 8 tackles. All 3 of them tied for second on the team in tackles with 8. Bullard was basically your slot cornerback, as we've been talking about in past weeks, so he only played 80% of the snaps. Williams only played 84% of the snaps, so Bullard did get a few snaps at deep safety as a result of that, as a side note, but not much. McKinney played 41% of the snaps in the slaughter box, which was much higher than he typically plays closer to the line of scrimmage. His deep rate of 59% this week was much lower than normal. Evan Williams played 64% deep, 36% close to the line of scrimmage. So that's how it played out this past week. Still always nervous about playing McKinney in particular if he doesn't get a big play. But this was one of those weeks that luckily, as I mentioned earlier, all those safeties got 8 tackles. It was on 76 snaps. Keyshawn Nixon, I've warned about this, that there was a risk because he's playing 100% outside, essentially, not playing hardly anything in the slot, not getting those kickoff return yards as well. He only had 2 tackles this week. Don't give up on him quite yet. The past several weeks, he has managed to put up decent tackle numbers, but be leery, be careful on Keyshawn Nixon as we move forward. Let's move on to the Minnesota Vikings here, who only played 50 snaps. Only 50 snaps against the Philadelphia Eagles. The biggest surprise was at the linebacker position, but there was a surprise at safety as well, and a little bit of surprise at the edge as well, and at defensive tackle. So lots of surprises for the Vikings on those 50 snaps. But we will start with the linebackers. Blake Cashman returns from injury, activated off of IR, plays 100% of those 50 snaps, only had 4 tackles. He didn't get a quarterback yet. Now, if Cashman is playing, meaning he's not hurt, we're playing Cashman in our lineups as a number 2 linebacker. But the big surprise was Eric Wilson took on the number 2 linebacker role away from Ivan Pace. Ivan Pace didn't play a single snap on defense. Eric Wilson played 84% of the snaps on defense. He was second on the team in tackles with 6 and actually had a sack and a half. Now, part of the reason for that could be the following. It was clear the Minnesota Vikings were trying to take Saquon Barkley out of the game. And you see that more when we talk about the safety stats. They were going to make the Eagles beat them by the pass and by the deep pass. And guess what? The Eagles actually did it. So credit to Jalen Hurts. And that's why A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith had monster games. It was because of how the Vikings attacked them defensively. And maybe they thought Eric Wilson was a better fit instead of Ivan Pace as a run stopper against Saquon Barkley in this Eagles offense. So could it return to Pace in an upcoming week? I think it can. But for now, it's Eric Wilson, and you can't chance playing Ivan Pace. And with all the bye weeks, if you need another linebacker, I think you'd be okay dropping Pace for somebody else who we've talked about previously on the show that's getting more opportunities, or maybe a little bit later here. But Pace, bad news with 0 snaps, and Eric Wilson. Now, remember, Eric Wilson wore the green dot in Cashman's absence, not Pace. So maybe this truly is a pecking order of Cashman, Wilson, and Pace. So if people thought, well, Cashman's back, they dropped Wilson, I think you got to go after Wilson in your waiver run, folks. Okay, on the edge, I mentioned a surprise or two there. Andrew Van Ginkel was out with a neck injury once again. Now, he was listed as a limited participant on Monday because they have a Thursday night game. It was a walkthrough, so it was at least good news that it was limited. When you hear neck injuries and you don't get much information, Shawn cautioned about this last week, that's usually not a good sign. But at least they talked about limited practice for Van Ginkel, so hopefully that's some good news. My bet is he doesn't play this Thursday, and they give him that extra time to recuperate, and then when they come back, then you see Andrew Van Ginkel back to his normal snap share. But with that, Jonathan Grenard played 94% of the snaps. Dallas Turner, who had played around 90% the week before, played only 60% this week. So that was the surprise for the edges that I want to talk to you about what a difference in the snap count that happened there. I'd like to have seen more productivity out of Grenard in that game, but once again, it was only 50 snaps that the Vikings played on defense because they gave up so many big plays as they were selling up to stop the run. Dallas Turner did get half a sack, luckily, and both Grenard and Turner had 3 tackles. Okay, moving to the defensive tackle position. The big surprise there, Javon Hargrave finished 4th in snaps among the defensive tackles with only 36%. Didn't hear any reports of any injuries, but Jonathan Allen played 88%, Jalen Redmond 74%, Levi Drake Rodriguez 48%. and then came Hargrave with his 36%. Allen had a very, very nice game for defensive tackles with 4 tackles and a half a sack, which is fantastic. Jalen Redmond also had 4 tackles, including a tackle for loss. But if you were hoping for Hargrave to return to, the Hargrave from about 3 years ago when he had all those sacks and tackles for losses and all, this is a horrible sign. And he also is known for being a decent run stopper as well. And if you're trying to stop the run and it's Barkley, that's not a good sign. And so maybe they thought Redmond and Rodriguez were even better run stoppers at this point in his career than Hargrave, and maybe we're just going to see him more in pass rushing situations. But if you have Hargrave, I think you got to move on from him at this point, folks. Okay, moving to the safety position. More surprises. Harrison Smith and Josh Metellus were the 2 safeties that played 100% of the snaps. I know a lot of people dropped Harrison Smith. I didn't have him on any teams this year. I stayed away from him because of the past injuries plus the age being 36. But here we go. Harrison Smith back to 100% of the snaps after playing roughly 40% of the snaps all these other previous weeks. Theo Jackson was the one that impacted. He was down to 84% of the snaps. Now, Smith played 60% of the snaps close to the line of scrimmage. Metellus played 98% of the snaps close to the line of scrimmage. Metellus only played 1 snap away from the line of scrimmage. For perspective, 49 out of 50 were close to the line of scrimmage. That's the Metellus we want and hope and love. Now, I expect it to be more 80% in the future, but that's why we played Josh Metellus. That's why we want him on our rosters. And that's why he led the team with 8 tackles and had half a sack to boot. Theo Jackson, in the snaps he did play, those 84%, 76% of the snaps that he did play were deep. Now, Harrison Smith is known to be a solid tackler. Once again, you have to ask the question, is this because of the way they were trying to stop Saquon Barkley and challenge the Eagles to beat them with the pass? And does Harrison Smith return to his 40 to 50%, and does Theo Jackson get closer to the 100%? That is definitely a risk. So just like I talked about with linebackers, we need to see how this plays out. So we play Metellus with confidence. We play Blake Cashman with confidence. And with the buys, if you're in deep leagues and you're desperate, then maybe play Eric Wilson and take that chance. And maybe you play Harrison Smith. But Harrison Smith in particular, I think, is a risk, a big risk. Okay, that is your Minnesota Vikings story. We're now going to move to the NFC South. And we're going to talk about the Atlanta Falcons to start. And the Atlanta Falcons played 66 snaps against the 49ers, which happens to be my birthday, June 6th, by the way, 6/6, if you want to send me a birthday card on that day. Anyway, I digress. All right, Caden Ellis played all 66 snaps and played 100%. In that 100% of the snaps, he had 9 tackles. Sorry, I got distracted there for a second. He also had an interception and a quarterback hit, which was fantastic. Divine Diablo got hurt early in the game, only played 14% of the snaps. J.D. Bertrand came in and played the other 86% of the snaps and led the team with 10 tackles, including 4 solo. You're not going to get much big play stuff out of Bertrand, but he is a solid tackler. Diablo has been labeled week to week, particularly with buys coming. J.D. Bertrand is probably on a lot of waiver wires. J.D. Bertrand is someone you want to go pick up and you can put into your lineup and play him as you would Diablo. And I actually think he will get more tackles. Diablo had a better chance of maybe getting some pass defenses or maybe a blitz potentially. Not really much on the blitz, but anyway, you can play Bertrand and expect the 8 to 10 tackles. Think Nate Landman, for lack of a better term. Okay? Although he's got Caden Ellis next to him, not Omar Speights next to him. All righty. That's the linebacker situation. On the edge, Jalen Walker, the rookie, was ruled out with a groin. No one really did anything from an edge perspective, and I do not consider Zach Harrison an edge. We'll come back and talk to him in a second. James Pierce led the edge position players with 61% of the snaps. Floyd had 50%. Everybody else below 50%. Pierce only had 1 tackle. We're still not playing James Pierce, folks. At the defensive tackle position, we had one of these Zach Harrison games. He was 3rd in snaps at defensive tackle behind rookie Ohoro, and love saying that name, and David Onyemata. They had 65 and 62% respectively. Harrison only had 59%. He had 4 total tackles, and he did get a sack. He had a couple of tackles for loss, one of which was a sack, of course. Now, they were singing his praises on the broadcast. But remember, this is Zach Harrison, a good, solid player from Ohio State, but he's not someone that we are chasing, folks, and know that for every game like this, you're going to have many others that are not like this. You want to take a shot in deeper leagues and in matchups where interior offensive linemen are really banged up for a particular team. Maybe you can take a shot on Zach Harrison there, but that's about it. Okay, let's move on to safety. Jesse Bates tied for the team lead with J.D. Bertrand. I should have said that earlier, with 10 tackles. Okay. Xavier Watts tied for next with 9 tackles, which is what Caden Ellis had. So the inside linebackers and safeties really were the tackling machines for the Falcons in this game. What was really great to see, Jesse Bates continues to have that in-the-box alignment with 79% of the snaps close to the line of scrimmage. Watts played 65% of the snaps deep. So it's clear the segmentation, and this has been a trend. It's great that Watts still had 9 tackles. And Bates getting those 10 tackles, a lot of it was because of the way he was going after Christian McCaffrey and the way Christian McCaffrey was being used and so forth. So great game for Bates, but with this usage, we can play Bates in our lineups. He hasn't given us the numbers we were hoping for to this point, but maybe this is the beginning of a bigger thing to happen, particularly with 6 teams on bye. I'm playing Jesse Bates this week. Speaking of our start-sit show, if you would have stayed with us till the end, you would have heard me talk about D. Alford, and you would have heard me say, don't play D. Alford, not the best of matchups in the world for D. Alford, particularly with A.J. Terrell coming back. Alford only played 33% of the snaps as the slot cornerback. Remember, Billy Bowman was out with injury. And with that, he had 1 tackle. So, once again, come to the Start-Sit show. In addition to this IDP Plus Advice show, you're going to get great information to hopefully keep you from making mistakes. That is the Atlanta Falcons story. Let's move on to the Carolina Panthers, folks. The Carolina Panthers. And, sorry, I got to record the timestamp, folks. Carolina Panthers only played 61 snaps against the Jets. Trevin Wallace wears the green dot again for I believe it's the 3rd week in a row now. 100% of the snaps, only 4 tackles. That's not good. Okay, throw him into the buckets with a lot of the others that I was criticizing earlier in the show. If you missed it, go listen to it, folks. Christian Roseboom only played 74% of the snaps, but tied for the team lead with 2 others with 7 tackles. Even though Roseboom is not playing the number of snaps that Trevor Wallace is, if you have to pick between the two, Christian Roseboom is the one you're playing, not Trevor Wallace. Wallace is like a low-end 4, maybe a high-end 5. I mean, it's from a linebacker perspective, it's not very good. So that's with 100% of the snaps. If they had someone else to play, I think they'd put him in. I just don't think they have confidence in anybody else on their roster at the linebacker position. Now, Patrick Jones, as we move to the edge for the Panthers, was placed on IR. DJ Wonnum returned to playing the most snaps on the edge, playing 70%. Nick Skirton, the rookie out of Texas A&M, played 66% of the snaps. Then Prince Umanumillion was 3rd with only 33%. He did leave the game briefly with an injury, but did return, so I don't think that had a huge impact on the snap count. Now, Skirton, and we did talk about him, and we talked about him as more of a taxi squad type of person. We're stashing him for Dynasty. We're not playing him. People are going to say, well, Ricky and Shawn, y'all said blah, blah, blah. And, but Skirton came through, and look at what he did. I'm like, yes, it was against Justin Fields and Tyrod Taylor. So if you got defensive edge players who are halfway decent playing against the Jets, you can consider playing them. More so Fields is starting at quarterback than Tyrod Taylor, but still against both. But look, Skirton had 2 tackles, okay? 1 solo, 1 assisted. Those happened to be his two sacks, sack and a half. 1 solo, 1 assisted. That's what he did. He did get 3 quarterback hits in total, but in terms of production, he got 1 sack, one assisted sack, and that's all he did basically for the whole game. So don't get too carried away with Nick Skirton. He will probably give you closer to a goose egg than those kind of results in the next couple of weeks. Derek Brown had a phenomenal game. Once again, the New York Jets, folks, and Justin Fields, who tends to hold the ball maybe a little bit too long, and who they tend to run the ball right at the middle quite a bit. So Derek Brown had 7 tackles, 3 quarterback hits, 2 sacks, 3 pass defense. Phenomenal game for Derek Brown. I've been high on Derek Brown. Remember 2 years ago, he had that insane amount of tackles for a defensive lineman. Of course, he missed last year with the injury. Hasn't really done much this year. Do I think this is repeatable? Yes, I think it's repeatable. Do I think it'll be an ongoing thing where we're going to see 7 tackles and 3 pass defenses? Absolutely not. Am I willing to play Derek Brown as a defensive tackle too? Yeah, I'm willing to play him as a defensive tackle too. But I got to be honest with you. If I had to pick between Shawn Robinson and Derek Brown of which one to start, I would actually start Shawn Robinson over Derek Brown. It'd be close, but right now it'd be Shawn Robinson, even though Brown had better stats this week. Shawn Robinson still had 4 tackles and a sack as well, to his credit. Moving to the safety position for the Panthers. Nick Scott and Trevin Merrick both played 100%. Lathan Ransom, who had been starting to get time for the Panthers, played 0 snaps on defense. He did play special teams. So he was, starting to get 30, 40% of the snaps. I don't remember the exact numbers, but it's roughly in that range. But none on defense in this game, even against the Jets. Okay. Nick Scott tied for the team lead in tackles with 7, along with Derek Brown and Christian Rosenblum, as we talked about them earlier. He primarily played deep safety, as he has been. Trevin Morrig played 79% of the snaps close to the line of scrimmage. We love that. And in this game, at least he got us 6 tackles and he got us a sack, which we're glad to see. Hopefully that usage continues, and hopefully we can get a little bit more efficiency from a tackle perspective out of Morrig, but a good week for him overall. Shaw Smith-Wade continues to be the slot cornerback for the Panthers, plays 74% of the snaps, got 3 tackles. That is your Carolina Panthers story. Let's move over to the New Orleans Saints, folks. And the New Orleans Saints played against the Chicago Bears and played 68 snaps on defense. I alluded to earlier that we would come back and talk about Pete Werner. Demario Davis played his typical 100% of the snaps, got 10 tackles, led the team. No surprise there. What will be a surprise is if Demario Davis is still in team past the trade deadline. Feels like they'll want to do him right and maybe try and trade him to a contender at his age and maybe give him a chance to play in the playoffs and maybe make it to the Super Bowl, something along those lines. But Pete Werner only played 53% of the snaps. And with that, he got 2 assisted tackles. Danny Stutzman, 24%. Isaiah Stallbird, 9%. Stutzman played mostly first and second down. Stallbird played mostly third and fourth downs. It was actually mostly third downs. The transition is starting to happen. I expect that Pete Werner will be looking for a new team in the offseason. And I think as the season progresses, particularly with the way the Saints are playing and their current record right now, Stutzman will continue to play more. And I think Stutzman will even get more passing down opportunities. But if Davis is traded and Werner continues to get benched, as we get to like week 13 or week 14, we could be looking at a situation where you have Danny Stutzman and Isaiah Stallbird as your 2 starting linebackers for the Saints. Okay. That's Ricky's quasi-crystal ball. It's a little bit foggy, but I can certainly see it heading in that direction. At the edge position, I've been giving Chase Young a hard time, rightfully so, but he had a pretty great game in his first game back from injury. Finally decided to start playing. He played the most snaps on the edge at 68% of the snaps with 3 total tackles, but he had 3 quarterback hits, half a sack, and 2 pass defenses. One of the things that Chase Young has struggled with the last couple of years has been getting a lot of pressures, some quarterback hits, but not really getting the sacks. At least in his first game, 3 quarterback hits against a fairly mobile Caleb Williams, who does take a decent amount of sacks, don't get me wrong, not as much as last year, and half a sack. I'm actually intrigued by Chase Young. Am I going crazy for him? No. Am I cautiously optimistic? Yes. Do I want to see more? Yes, that is the case, but something to keep an eye on. Carl Granderson was all the way down to 60% of snaps. 3 assisted tackles is all he had. No quarterback hits. Cam Jordan all the way down to 41% of snaps. 3 assisted tackles, no quarterback hits. So Chase Young's playing time, he moved all the way to the front of the line and had a significant impact on Granderson Jordan. Chris Rumph continued to be the number 4 edge for the Saints, or now the number 4 edge. He was sort of the number 3, and he still played 32% of the snaps. So major hit for Cam Jordan, major hit for Granderson. Was this a 1 week thing? Possibly, but boy, I could see this being the normal rotation. Cam Jordan is sort of like Alvin Kamara in that he's been such a Saint loyalist all these years. Of course, Kamara said if they traded him that he would go sip a pina colada somewhere, which implies that he would retire. Would Cam Jordan say the same to the Saints, or would he say, yeah, I'm willing to go somewhere else to maybe chase a ring as opposed to being on a 1-10 team, 2-9 team, whatever it might be kind of thing? I can see that potentially happening with Cam Jordan as well if they want to do him right and he's willing to move. And a team, it might be a late round pick swap, but Saints might be willing to do something along those lines for him. And if there's a team that looking for some experience and depth for their defensive lines. At defensive tackle, Brian Bresee was all the way up to 78% of the snaps. And with that came 4 tackles and a half a sack. So some good news finally for Brian Bresee. If he plays this percentage of snaps, we'll have to see if that continues. This could be a 1-week trend, but finally some positive signs out of Brian Bresee. Giannis Sanker and Justin Reed both played 100% of the snaps. Justin Reed back from that concussion. Sanker played 71% deep. Justin Reed has been a letdown throughout the year, even though he did get 6 tackles in this game. We're not chasing it. And Sanker, with him playing that many snaps deep, you got to expect if he doesn't get a big play, 5 tackles, 3 of which are solo, might kind of be the average or the norm. Alontae Taylor finished second on the team with tackling with 7, played 97% of the snaps, playing outside in the slot, great usage, not getting as much blitzing from him in that slot role as he did under Dennis Allen, but nice solid tackles. Quincy Riley has been playing the number 3 cornerback role and has done quite well. And I don't think the Saints really have a reason to play Isaac Yiadom, apologies in terms of how to say his name. Yiadom has been hurt the past couple of weeks, and that's given Riley the opportunity to play. But I think you got to play Riley and let the rookie continue to develop based on where the Saints are right now. And I think that's what they'll continue to do here. All right, let's move to Tampa Bay. Played 68 snaps on Monday night versus the Detroit Lions. And Levante David and Servasi Dennis both almost played 100% of snaps. Dennis and David both kind of, I think, might have gotten briefly dinged, but went back into the game. Dennis led second on the team in tackles with 12 and plus a sack. Really nice to see that from Servasi Dennis. Of course, the Lions run the ball a lot, which is going to contribute to a lot of linebacker tackles. Now, Levante David continues to not have the big tackle numbers he used to have earlier in his career. Only had 7 tackles, no really big plays. He did get 1 tackle for loss. And of his 7 tackles, only 1 was solo. So Levante David's still someone I want to trade, folks, if you can, in your leagues. At the edge position, Hassan Reddick got hurt during the game. He still played 65% of the snaps. It was later in the game when he got hurt. No tackles. He did get 1 quarterback hit, but he didn't do much in his limited time. Yaya Diaby ended up playing 78% of the snaps, so he picked up a few extra snaps with Reddick being hurt later in the game. 5 tackles, including 2 tackles for loss and a sack. So great output for Yaya Diaby. 4 sacks on the year already. I believe he had 4.5 all year, but he had a great PFF, pass rush win rate, had a lot of pressures last year. So his sack to win rate last year was on the lower side. This year it is catching up. We're getting a little positive regression with Yaya Diaby. So if someone gave up on him, we want to pick him up, and he'll probably get more snaps depending on the results of Reddick's MRI on his knee and ankle, which as of when I started recording this, I hadn't seen any reports as of yet. If Reddick is out, expect Anthony Nelson to be the number 2 linebacker. Edge. Chris Braswell to be the number 3 edge. Okay? Moving inside, I talked earlier about how we typically don't trust nose tackles. Vita Vea is one of those few exceptions. 81% of the snaps, 3 tackles, 2 quarterback hits. In defensive tackle required leagues, you're playing him. Elijah Roberts, the rookie, while, when they go through the starting lineups at the beginning of these broadcasts on TV, they showed Vita Vea, Logan Hall, and Greg Gaines as the starters on the defensive line, and that is true. But Gaines only played 28% of the snaps. Elijah Roberts, the rookie, played 68% of the snaps. Ended up having a fun recovery. Didn't have a lot stats-wise, but once again, he's someone I've mentioned previous and someone to just keep an eye on. Okay? Moving to the safety position, the Antoine Winfield yo-yo continues. The good news is he had 8 tackles. Tyke Smith had one hell of a game, led the team with 13 tackles and a sack. Tyke played 94% of the snaps. Winfield played 99% of the snaps. Let's talk about their alignment, because every week people want to hear about this, particularly these Tampa Bay safeties. Winfield only played 40% of the snaps close to the line of scrimmage, 4-0. Tyke played 62% close to the line of scrimmage. The Lions' running game was gashing the Tampa Bay lineup so bad that it created opportunities for Winfield to rack up a lot of tackles, even though he played, 60% deep. So that kind of helped contribute to his numbers. We've talked about Winfield a lot on previous shows. We talked about Tyke Smith. Tyke Smith we see as a number 1 safety. Winfield is going to continue to yo-yo us. This was a great week. A lot depends on matchups as we continue to decide if we're going to play Winfield or not. At the cornerback position, McCullum played 100% of the snaps. He was the only cornerback to play 100% of the snaps. Benjamin Morris, 32%. Jamel Dean, 66%. On the broadcast, I believe it was Troy Aikman was talking about, I don't understand why Dean's just on the sidelines, why he's not out there, blah, blah, blah. It's because for the past several weeks, they should have known that there's been this rotation when Morrison and Dean have been healthy between the two of them. And Dean, remember, redid his contract before the year. And with that, this will be the last year of Dean's contract with Tampa Bay for him to become a free agent. And it's clear they grew him in Morrison to replace Dean and just continue to ease Morrison in and play Dean less. And Zion McCullum, they just signed to a 3-year extension. So this has become the McCullum and Morrison show as we move forward. And so Jamel Dean has had, he had another interception this game, which is great. So he's had a couple of big plays which have bailed us out. But continue to rely on Jamel Dean is not the thing to do. Find you another cornerback in cornerback required leagues. Because as it goes on, we're going to see more Morrison playing time and less Dean. Unless Morrison completely flops. Maybe as we get closer to the end of the year, too, maybe. Okay, so I'll take it back as I'm trying to think about it out loud. As we get close to playoff time, if Morrison isn't improving, where they need him, maybe Dean plays more at playoff time, late in the season. But for now, at this point of the year, you're risking it playing Jamel Dean. That's the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We move to the NFC West now, and we go to the Arizona Cardinals. And the Arizona Cardinals here, folks, played 56 snaps versus the Green Bay Packers. They are going on bye this coming week. Mack Wilson, another one of these linebackers that decided to take off week 7, who played 100% of the snaps but only had 3 tackles. And at one point in the game, I think it was like midway through the third quarter, he had no stats. It was like, is he hurt? Is he hurt? Nope. He was playing. He just wasn't accumulating the stats against the Packers. But somehow, Akeem Davis-Gaither, who played 88% of the snaps, tied for the team leading tackles with 8, also forced a fumble and had a pass defense. So I don't know what to tell you. Akeem Davis-Gaither continues to be very efficient, continues to play more snaps than they've typically used the second linebacker position, and is much more effective than he's been in the past. So I do know what to tell you. It's time for Ricky to kind of say, okay, Ricky, get off these past things about Akeem Davis-Gaither. Play the dude, okay? Okay, he's not a number one or number two linebacker, but he's certainly a number three linebacker right now is ADG, Akeem Davis-Gaither. Moving to the edge position, Sweat had those sacks 4 weeks in a row. Going into the fourth week, I said, there's no way he repeats it. There's no way he repeats it. Yeah, he proved me wrong in that fourth week, but and had another sack, but that's 2 weeks in a row now. He has not had a sack. Sorry, Rougarou, if you're listening to this, apologies that I put the kind of reverse hex on him. That's causing him not to have the sacks, excuse me. I got hex and sacks mixed up, and sorry about that. But anyway, Josh Sweat did play 66% of the snaps, did have 2 tackles, and a tackle for loss, but no sacks for him. Browning, Collins, and Birch were next in order in terms of snaps played. Nothing really to talk about there, even though Zaven Collins got credited for a sack because a quarterback tripped, and he happened to be the closest guy next to him. I'll just leave it at that. Calais Campbell played 48% of the snaps, had 4 tackles, the most among the interior defensive line, but 6 different players played at this defensive tackle, interior defensive line position for the Arizona Cardinals. It's hard to trust any of them. In your deeper leagues, Calais Campbell is maybe the only one you can potentially play. At the safety position, Budda Baker, Jalen Thompson, 100% of the snaps. Dadrian Taylor and Diverson all the way down to 43% of the snaps. Okay? He luckily got 6 tackles for you. And he played the most deep snaps of those 3 safeties, only at 54%. But Budda Baker played 73% close to the line of scrimmage. Jalen Thompson played 62% close to the line of scrimmage. Taylor Dimerson only played 46% close to the line of scrimmage. So that's how the percentages worked out. It's hard to continue playing Taylor Dimerson. You're risking fate. You're tempting fate by playing him with, these 40 to 50% of the snaps, although he's been very productive on those limited snaps. Budda Baker, is very nice to see him finally get more than 6 tackles, which it seems like the last 3 or 4 weeks in a row he had 6 tackles, 6 tackles, 6 tackles, up to 8 this week, which is great news. As I talked about, the Cardinals are going on bye. Not much more to talk about with the Cardinals there. So let's go ahead and move on to the LA Rams, where we do have some things to talk about there. On the LA Rams, they played 77 snaps against the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Jacksonville Jaguars were in catch-up mode, and that led to a lot of snaps being played on defense. It was a blowout game as well. Keep that in mind, because at the linebacker position, Nate Landman, while he did have 9 tackles and got credit for a sack and a half, and I probably could have told you that was going to happen because I was playing against him in 2 of my favorite leagues, but he only played 81% of the snaps against the Jaguars. That still resulted in 62 snaps, but because of the blowout, he didn't play nearly as much. With Omar Spates returning from injury, I know a lot of people were out there talking about, Sean Dolac. Well, Spates returned to his normal role, played 58% of the snaps, didn't necessarily go out during blowout time. Troy Reeder came in as the number 3 linebacker when Nate Landman went to the bench and put on a baseball cap, basically, because of the blowout nature of the game. Sean Dolac did not play a single snap on defense. So it's Landman, Spates, Reeder, Dolac, folks, at the linebacker position. On the edge, Byron Young got a sack and a half. Jared Verse got a sack. Those 2 continue to play phenomenally. Now, I didn't get to see the whole game. Part of it was because I was doing the Start Sit show live. But if I understand correctly, Byron Young did not actually touch the quarterback in his sack and a half. Both of them were like forced out of bounds situations, something along those lines. So he had to have touched him on the half sack. I don't know. But anyway, he did get credit for a sack and a half. I wish I could erase that, but I'm not going back and delete it, folks. So just ignore that last part. But anyway, Young's in the discussion for Defensive Player of the Year right now. And this is not a fluke. And he's leading the league in sacks. Now they're going on bye. So keep that in mind. You have to replace him and Verse in your lineups if you have them. The only other thing I'll mention on the edge, Josiah Stewart did get a little bit more snaps because of the blowout nature of the game. He was up to 44%. He got a sack as well. The young guy from Michigan looks pretty good. He is on the shorter side, but that didn't stop the Rams from drafting him. And with some of the pressure in that Kobe Turner and Braden Fisk and Poona Ford and Tyler Davis and so forth are forcing on the inside, that helps these outside guys, including Josiah Stewart, if he ever needed to play, if First or Young were injured, and I hope they are not, and I don't mean to jinx that in any way, shape, or form. At the safety position, Quentin Lake is one of the ones that I have to admit that I was wrong on to start the year. I traded him away in Win Dynasty League for a fourth rounder, and I really regret it at this particular moment. He had 6 tackles, he had a sack, he had 2 pass defenses, he had a forced fumble, played 95% of the snaps close to the line of scrimmage. Just absolutely beautiful. Cam Curl continues to amaze, though, with 10 tackles, 8 of which were solo, throw 1 pass defense in there later in the game. And he's doing that while playing 77% of the snaps deep. Cam Curl continues to play phenomenal. He is a number 1 safety. You're playing him every week. Cam Kinchins got hurt with a toe injury, so he only played limited snaps, less than 50%. Jalen McCullough played 61% of the snaps, which I think was a season high. I didn't get a chance to go back and double check that, folks. But remember, McCullough is also the one that when they take Spates off the field and they want to have like that second linebacker who is more of a coverage linebacker, they've been moving McCullough from that safety spot into that Spates second linebacker role. If he ends up getting Kinchin snaps along with some of those Spates snaps in passing situations, he could be in the 80% range. And he's been pretty productive, not necessarily in this last game, but going back to last year when he's gotten a lot of snaps. There's something to keep an eye on in very deep leagues. Jalen McCullough, just keep that in mind. You heard it here first. We're not touching any of the cornerbacks for the Rams because none of them played more than 70%. We're moving on from the Rams cornerbacks. Let's move on to the San Francisco 49ers, folks. And the San Francisco 49ers played 65 snaps against the Atlanta Falcons on Sunday night. Of course, big news the week before, Fred Warner, broken ankle, out for the year, had his surgery. There's talk that he could make it back in playoff time. I'm not going to bet on that necessarily. It was announced during the week, and we talked about on our show that Tatum Bethune was going to be the green dot, go out and pick him up. Got a little bit panicked early in the game when I saw him not on the field, and I saw Curtis Robinson in his spot. Bethune got banged up earlier, was on the sideline. They eventually put him back in for Robinson. That's why Bethune only played 86% of the snaps. It was because he got banged up there for a period of time. But he did lead the team with 10 tackles, including a tackle for loss. He was hustling all over the field. Bethune is someone that you can play every week, and he is a number 2 linebacker. D. Winters, unfortunately, disappointing tackles again, still playing 100% of the snaps. I'm not worried about Winters yet still, but right now he's a lower end 3 for me. He's not a number 2 linebacker as I was hoping. He's more of a number 3 right now. Hopefully we see those tackles pick up for Winters, and I have confidence that it will. At the edge position, Bryce Huff, who has basically been known as a sack or bust type of player, ended up leading the edge players in snaps at 69%. He also had 5 tackles, very unusual for Bryce Huff. I wouldn't be surprised if that's a career high. I didn't go research it. If someone wants to research it and let me know, then starts this show or put it in the YouTube channel, please let me know. And I'll be checking those, as will Shawn, to check your comments, questions, suggestions. He did get a sack as well. He got 2 quarterback hits. You're thinking, oh my gosh, we may be able to play Bryce Huff on a regular basis. No, he ends up getting hurt late in the game. He is now described as week to week by the coaches of the 49ers. Huff won't be playing this coming week. What an absolute bummer for him to sort of have a quasi-breakout game from a tackle perspective go along with a sack, and for him to not be playing. Very disappointing. Sam O got a sack, and y'all know I can't pronounce his last name, but we're not chasing Sam O. Mikael Williams played 65% of the snaps, had 3 assisted tackles. his snap count could go up, but his pass rush win rate is still not that great from a PFF perspective. So it's going to be tackles or bust. You're not going to get a lot of big plays. You might get a few tackles out of Mikael Williams. All righty, we're going to skip defensive tackles. There's not a whole lot to talk about there other than Alfred Collins played 60% of the snaps. No other defensive tackle played more than 35% for the 49ers. Safety, boy, they screwed with us this week. Jair Brown, once again, 100% of the snaps. Complete surprise when that happened last week. Wondering if that was going to be a fluke, particularly with Malik Mustafa coming back and all. Oh, no. Brown plays 100% of the snaps, gets 5 tackles, played 63% deep. Mustafa plays 69% of the snaps. Jason Pinnock plays 35% of the snaps. Marquise Siegel plays 31% of the snaps. Now, Pinnock, depending on who you want to ask, played 100% of the snaps close to the line of scrimmage when he was in there. He wasn't in there very much, 1/3 of the snaps roughly, but 100% close to the line of scrimmage. Marquise Siegel, 60% of the snaps close to the line of scrimmage, but only on 31% of the snaps, as I mentioned. Unfortunately, you can't play Mustafa, Pinnock, and Siegel unless one of these guys steps to the plate and becomes the true second safety next to Jair Brown. And will Jair Brown really keep that other safety role playing 100% of the snaps? I'm not convinced he will. So what does this mean for all 4 safeties? I'm staying away from all of them. Now, once again, 6 buys, we've talked about it multiple times. You may be forced to play a safety. And with Jair Brown playing 100% of the snaps, you got to take a chance that he'll play 100% of the snaps again. I wouldn't feel great about it, but that's who I'd probably play if I had to from a safety position, and I wouldn't play any of these other 3 at this point in time unless the coaches come out and say, okay, we're now going to play Mustafa 100% of the snaps next to Brown, or whichever one it might be. Okay. Renardo Green got hurt at cornerback. If he's someone you're relying on, hopefully you were not relying on Renardo Green. When he got hurt, Darrell Luter took his snaps. Upton Stout was out injured as a slot cornerback. He was declared inactive. We warned of this as a risk. I believe it was during the Start Sit show that Upton Stout, while he was listed as questionable, didn't even practice on the Friday practice. So have another alternative. Chase Lucas ended up playing the snaps that Stout would play. Hopefully Stout will be back from that injury. And in the right matchups, you can play Stout. This was not a matchup against the Falcons where you were going to play Upton Stout. Let's move on to the Seattle Seahawks, who played 76 whopping snaps against the Houston Texans because the Texans were in catch-up mode, and boy, it was not good. A good offensive showing for the Houston Texans. Ernest Jones played 100% of the snaps, led the team with 12 tackles. Fantastic game. The trend continues at the number 2 linebacker position with Drake Thomas now playing 89% of the snaps. Tyrese Knight played 0 snaps on defense. That was after only 2 last week. So it's clear this is Ernest Jones 1, Drake Thomas 2, and Tyrese Knight. You need binoculars to see him as the number 3 linebacker. Okay? Tyrese Knight had a tackle on special teams. That was it. So if Thomas is going to play 89% of the snaps and get 5 tackles and a quarterback hit and 3 pass defenses, yeah, you can play him. But will he play 89% of the snaps every week? They're going on bye this coming week, and it's expected that Julian Love will return from injury. It's expected that Devin Witherspoon will return from injury. Nicky Monwari, who's been playing that Devin Witherspoon slot role, will he take some snaps away from Drake Thomas in certain situations? I think the answer to that is yes. In deep leagues, maybe you play Drake Thomas, but in non-deep leagues, when they come back from bye, and if assuming all those other guys are back from injury, I'd be leery about playing Drake Thomas and certainly not playing Tyrese Knight. And if you need to drop someone for a waiver pickup because of all the buys, say bye-bye to Tyrese Knight. At the edge position, I know my buddy Shawn, who unfortunately, and if you missed the beginning of the show, Shawn, his children are back in school and they had some sporting events tonight, so he wasn't able to join. But he has not been a Nwosu fan. I have kind of gotten on the Nwosu bandwagon and continue to push him. Now, he played 76% of the snaps this week. DeMarcus Lawrence, 70%. Boye Mafe, 63%. They were basically your three edges for the Seahawks in this game. Derek Hall was out injured. Derek Hall is expected to be back after the bye, which means he will probably take up 40 to 50% of those snaps, and those snap counts for those others will come down. With Boye Mafe, my expectation will come down the most of all of those four. But I will still be continuing to play Nwosu. I think his snap count will still be in that 65% range. I think he'll give you 2 to 3 tackles with a chance at a sack. Now, I haven't looked at the schedule, and if they're playing a team that has 2 solid bookend tackles, well, then maybe I'm not going to play Nwosu. But if it's so-so tackles, I think I'm in on Nwosu, particularly in deeper leagues. Leonard Williams continues to be a solid player as a defensive tackle with 3 tackles, including 2 quarterback hits. Byron Murphy continues his second-year breakout. 62% of the snaps, but 6 tackles, including a tackle for loss. Byron Murphy continues to climb up that defensive tackle ladder. He's moving into the higher end number 2 defensive tackle range, maybe even getting close to that number 1, lower end number 1 defensive tackle range. That's how strongly I feel about Byron Murphy. I mentioned earlier as we moved to the defensive secondary, Love was out. In his absence, once again, Ty Okada played 100% of the snaps, had 9 tackles, which was second on the team. Also got a sack, which was phenomenal. Great stats if you took the chance on playing Okada. But Julian Love will be back. Okada will be going back to the bench as Love comes in, and particularly going into a bye week. If you took advantage of Okada, great, but you can drop him because Love is expected to be back, and you can pick up somebody else to play that safety position. Nick Emanwari, I heard it pronounced both ways during the broadcast, played 93% of the snaps. I was shocked to see how much it was because as I'm box score watching during the game, he was not registering. He basically finally had 2 assisted tackles and got 2 pass defenses. But I looked, he played 99% of the snaps close to the line of scrimmage. He played a lot of that Devin Witherspoon role. Very disappointing in that output that he had. Now, a lot of that, I think, was tied to the Houston offense, and there's a lot of YOLO throws down the field by C.J. Stroud, which impacted his opportunity, not to mention they didn't have really any semblance of a running game whatsoever. Blaming it more on matchup than actual Emanwari not being a good player. And they talked about on the broadcast how the coaches are singing the praises of Emanwari. He's someone I want in a dynasty league, folks. If you're in a dynasty league, I'm still trying to trade for him and maybe trying to buy off the low as a side note. All right, that completes the Seattle Seahawks, and that completes all 32 teams, folks. So as a reminder, though, we've got our start-sit show Sunday morning. I've mentioned it a couple of times, but I'm going to mention a third time here, 11 a.m. Eastern, 10 o'clock Central. Even if you don't think you have specific questions, come listen because some of the questions drive a lot of dialogue that could impact your decision-making that you thought you had made and might cause you to change based on our analysis, our being Shawn Teague, my partner in crime. If you like this show, please give it a thumbs up. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, put it on the YouTube channel. As I mentioned a couple of times, Shawn and I will check that out. Give me a follow, please, at RickyRod66 and Shawn at 8386. And once again, we would appreciate that thumbs up. We have our Start-Sit show this coming Sunday. Be on the lookout for my Twitter because next Tuesday I might be in a travel risk situation and Shawn might have a risk to his availability because of his children's sports activities as well. So follow me on Twitter or /X, if anything, just to know about the show and the timing as a side note, okay? On behalf of my partner who's not here, Shawn Teague, but I know he'd want me to wish this to you, I'm Ricky Rodrigue, wishing you, your family, your friends great health and happiness. Be kind to one another And we will see you Sunday morning, hopefully, for the Start Sit Show. Take care, everybody.
Thank you for watching the IDP Plus YouTube network. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Be sure to tap the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload new content.